Pirate God Level Cartoonist, Chapter 121-140. Chapter 121 Stunned Steel Skeleton. Mary Joa Eastside. At this time, the East City had already been reduced to ruins, and there were ruins and ruins everywhere, as well as the corpses of naval soldiers, a scene after the war. However, the battle is not over. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion sounded, and a hurricane visible to the naked eye swept all around, setting off smoke and dust in the sky. In the center of Dongcheng, two figures collided wildly, and every move shocked everything around them. One of the figures is a bald old man, wearing a white Taoist robe and holding a long knife. Every time he makes a move, he will definitely bring out a great sword chi, and when it breaks out by accident, it will spread across the sky, with an aura that cuts through everything. He is one of the 5 old stars, a strong swordsman, Miyamoto Yuenjai. Boom! It was another collision with all their strength. This time the two of them flew backwards and stood 100 meters apart. Huchi, Huchi, after a few violent breaths, Drago's rapid breathing gradually calmed down. After silently calculating the time in his heart, Drago couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth. There are still 5 minutes before Estes told him to delay, that is to say, he will have to fight Miyamoto Yuansai again. What's wrong? The famous Drago can't do any more. Miyamoto Yuansai stood with a knife, looking at Drago and sneered. Humph! Drago snorted coldly. How are you doing? Can you beat me with your physical strength? Hearing this, Miyamoto Yuenjai's expression suddenly froze, and his face was a little unsightly. Indeed, the long-term pampering life has made his strength regress a lot, coupled with the age, his physical strength has declined seriously. If you really have to work hard, Miyamoto Yuenjai knows that he is indeed not Drago's opponent. Kid with sharp teeth and sharp mouth, let me see how long you can hold on. Miyamoto Yuansai squatted down in a lunge, holding swords at his sides, posing a stance of dashing forward. Drago's complexion also became solemn, and he was ready to fight. The auras of the two kept colliding, and a depressing aura spread around them. Death! Miyamoto Yuenjai stepped forward and was about to rush out. However, at this moment, a series of roars suddenly came from afar, and approached the place where the two were at a very fast speed. The next moment, accompanied by an earth-shattering loud noise, a dazzling white light pierced through dozens of walls and crashed on the ground between the two of them. Boom! An unprecedented explosion resounded throughout Marijoa, and a violent shock wave was generated in the center of the explosion, setting off countless stones and sputtering around. What? Miyamoto Yuansai quickly swung his knife, smashing the incoming stones. On the other side, Drago was also dodging. When the explosion gradually subsided, the two of them looked towards the center of the explosion. In the center of the explosion, there was a stout old man covered in blood and unconscious. When he saw the old man's appearance, Miyamoto Yuenjai couldn't help but exclaimed, "Steel bone." This is... Drago's pupils shrank, and a horrified look appeared on his face. Lying on the ground is the former Marshal of the Navy, the current Commander-in-Chief of the entire army, Steel Skeleton Kong. Who the hell can beat him like this? This question appeared in the minds of Miyamoto Yuansai and Drago at the same time. A trace of fear spread in the hearts of the two. You must know that the Battle of Marijoa only lasted less than an hour. The strength of the person who can beat the steel bone into this shape in such a short period of time is terrifying. Oh, where are you two? A brisk voice suddenly came from the side of the two of you. Miyamoto Tosai and Drago subconsciously looked in the direction of the sound. I saw a man wearing a black robe and a mask on his face standing not far from them, looking at them. It is Roha, who has been fighting with Cyborg for a long time. Seeing Roha, the two looked different. Drago looked happy, but in his surprised eyes, there was a trace of horror. He found that he really underestimated Roha's strength. On the other side, after seeing Drago's expression, Miyamoto Yuansai's face suddenly turned gloomy. Dealing with a Drago is already his limit, and now with a mysterious person whose ability is unknown, Miyamoto Yuansai cannot beat him at all. Without any hesitation, Miyamoto Yuansai suddenly disappeared in place. The next moment, Miyamoto Yuanjai appeared next to the steel bone, grabbed the steel bone, and fled desperately towards the distance. Drago just wanted to intercept Miyamoto Tosai, but after seeing Roha shaking his head, he stopped. Seeing the departure of Miyamoto Yuansai, Roha was also relieved, not that he couldn't beat the other party, but it was not worth it at all. He and Drago shot at the same time, and of course they can kill Miyamoto Yuansai, but strong players of this level will have desperate cards. Even if they win, the loss will not be small. While Roha was relieved, the voice of the system also sounded in his mind. The ability fragments of Sagoban Junba have been consumed, and the ability has been stripped. Looking at his stock of fragments, Roha felt a pain in the flesh. The steel bone is worthy of being a former naval marshal. His strength is extremely powerful, and his weaponry is domineering. Not only is the hardness far ordinary, but it can even cover the whole body. After just a few minutes of fighting, Roha knew that with his current swordsmanship and stigmata liberation, it was impossible to win the steel bone in a short time. Knowing that time is precious, he simply used several ability fragments such as psychic power, physical regeneration, in a row, and finally made a decisive blow with the ability of the seventh man of Academy City, Soba Ida. Are you all right? Roha looked at Drago's rags because of the battle, twitched the corners of his mouth, and held back his smile. It's okay. Drago shook his head, thinking a little about how Roha defeated Cyborg, but in the end he didn't ask. Then let's go. The two silently ran towards the port together, gathering up the stray slaves and their companions along the way. On the other side, Miyamoto Yuansai stopped out of breath after running for nearly 1,000 meters with the steel skeleton. After taking a long breath, Miyamoto Yuanjai's face suddenly turned hideous. Damn, if the four of them hadn't gone to take care of that lord, how could they have succeeded? We must call them back quickly. Quote. P.S. Let's talk about the Soba Ida military tyrant here. The ranking of the 7 capable players in Academy City is not based on absolute strength. The Sobata army tyrant is ranked 7th because of the unknown and difficult development and utilization of abilities. In fact, his strength is enough to rank in the top 3. In the novel, he extinguished the forest fire with the strong wind generated by his strong fists. Of course, the first 3 are in my personal opinion, and do not cause disputes in combat power discussions. Chapter 122 Aokiji on board. Reaching out his hand and wiping it in his arms, Miyamoto Yuanjai was taken aback. It was only then that he remembered that he had been a 5-old star for too long, and he had long since lost the habit of carrying phone bugs with him. TMD. Miyamoto Yuansai looked anxious and looked left and right. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. On the counter of a store on the side of the road, he actually saw a phone bug. Running over in a hurry, Miyamoto Yuansai dialed the phone. Who? Came an old voice from the phone worm. It's me, you come back quickly, there is an invasion of Mary Joa. Miyamoto Yuansai said eagerly. What? There was a loud noise from the phone bug, and then another person answered the phone. What the hell is going on? Even if you add steel bones, the green pheasants can't stop it. The steel bones have been defeated, and the green pheasants are missing. Come back quickly, they will run away later. Understood, we leave one person to take care of the adults, and the rest will go back, you hold them back. Pat. The phone bug was hung up. Miyamoto Yuanjai looked at the phone bug and snorted coldly. Hold them down, he goes to die, and then gets succeeded by 4 others, right? What a joke. The relationship between the 5 old stars is no longer as harmonious as it used to be. The desire for power has eroded everyone, and everyone is greedy and staring at the power in the other's hands. The reason why they can still rule jointly is only because there are 4 emperors who are eyeing the new world. But if any one person dies or is seriously injured, the other 4 people don't mind taking over the right of that person at all, and even say that the other person's life will be terminated. This is also the reason why the 5 old stars let the pirates grow and develop after Roger's death. Even if 5 people surrounded and killed a 4 emperor-level powerhouse, there would definitely be serious injuries, and the weak people would be swallowed up by the other 4. No one dares to do it, and no one wants to be a pioneer. In such a situation of mutual checks and balances, they let the pirates develop, and until today the 4 emperors have formed. It is too late to think about it. After a moment of silence, Miyamoto Yuansai walked towards the World Government Building with the steel skeleton. Not long after Miyamoto Yuanjai left, a white-haired old man slowly walked out of the shadow in the corner, looked at Miyamoto Yuanjai's back, and stretched out the ancient sword behind him several times, killing intent lingering. In the end, Laolu still did not draw his sword, sighed, and swept out of the city of Marijoa. There are 3 amazing momentum over there, approaching the direction of this Marijoa. ... Pen _ In the center of Marijoa City, in the middle of a group of slaves, Roja looked into the distance with a solemn expression. Beside him, Drago also stopped, his expression extremely solemn. 5 old stars, Drago said solemnly. It should be, I didn't expect them to go far. Roja frowned, turned his head and glanced around. The slaves beside him surrounded Roja tightly, looking at him as if looking up at a god. Let's go. Roja sighed, better leave before they come. If he is really caught up by the 5 old stars, Roja can only use Accelerator's character card to fight, and even Estes has to shoot. That kind of result is not what he wants. The group moved forward again, but just as they ran around the corner of the block, the slave in front suddenly stopped with an exclamation. What's wrong? Roja lined up the crowd and walked to the front. When he saw the people blocking the crowd, he raised his eyebrows. Aoki. At the same time, Roja also noticed the 2 girls behind Aokiji, and there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. What's the situation? Admirals and slaves. And the oldest of the 2 little girls is only 16 or 17, isn't it a bit heavy? You are the masterminds who rescued the slaves. Aokiji didn't talk, but pulled the 2 girls behind him, came to Roja, and put their hands in Roja's. Take care of them and don't let me down. After speaking, Aokiji turned around and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a small hand suddenly grabbed the corner of Aokiji's clothes. Uncle, don't go, okay. The younger sister timidly grabbed the green pheasant, and looked at him begging with big watery eyes. In this short 1 hour, Qingzi's careful care made her sister find the feeling of being at home, and she was reluctant to leave Qingzi. Although the elder sister didn't say anything, she still held the Aokiji silently. Seeing this scene, Roja also became interested, turned his head and signaled Drago to leave with the large troop. Roja stood quietly, wanting to see how Aokiji chooses. A struggling look appeared on Qingzi's face. When he saw the little girl grabbing the scars on his arm, he gritted his teeth and nodded slowly. Okay, I'm not leaving. Holding the hands of the 2 sisters, Aokiji looked at Roja. Is there still room on your boat? Yes, as many as you want. Roja glanced at Aokiji in surprise, then nodded. He knew what it meant for Aokiji to make this choice, so he was so surprised. Just when the 4 of Roja were about to leave, behind them, there was an earth-shattering explosion from outside the city of Marijoa. At the same time as this explosion, there was an extremely sharp sword intent, and its sword intent was so powerful that Roja could clearly feel the power even if it was so far apart. This sword intent. A suspicious look appeared in Roja's eyes, and after a few seconds his eyes suddenly widened. Old Willow. It's your companion. It looks like he's in trouble. Qingziya looked at the sword intent that was tit for tat with the momentum of the 5 old stars. Are you going to help him? Roja hesitated and shook his head. Don't help him, that's his own choice. At this time, Roja remembered what Rayleigh whispered to him after introducing Laolu to him. Laolu, he has had many twists and turns in his life. He has had brothers, confidants, and many enemies, but what he hates most is Wu Laoxing, because his family was led by Wu Laoxing when he was in seclusion. The people were wiped out, and no one of the more than 70 people in the entire clan survived. Quote, "That old guy didn't know about it until a while ago. At that time, he wanted to kill Mary Joa for revenge, but I persuaded him to stop it. So this time may be his last chance. If he shoots, then you don't have to worry about him anymore. The old guy won't live long. That may be his last madness." Chapter 123 5 Old Stars, Die. Outside of Marijoa. The 5 old stars stared at the swordsman who suddenly appeared, their eyes extremely solemn. None of them thought that someone would ambushing them halfway, and the technique of restraining the breath was so clever that it was only the first time they fought, and one of the 3 was cut off on the arm, leaving a folder more than 10 centimeters long, and deep bone scars can be seen. Midokanemen, Zobok, San. There are only 3 of them, but that's enough. Lao Lu held his sword in one hand and stopped in front of the 3 of them, his eyes drooping, and his wrinkled face showed no joy or anger, but no one could feel the cold and biting killing intent on the other side. As long as I kill you all. Any one person is enough to comfort the souls of my family. Quote, "Kill one of us." The blonde and golden-bearded Zobok laughed coldly. "Old guy, are you crazy?" On the other hand, the injured San didn't know what to do, but he stopped the wound and continued to bleed, and his wound was still slowly healing. "Damn guy, I must tear you to pieces." Looking at the wound on his arm, San's face was so hideous that the scars on his face were twisted. This is the first time he has been injured since he served as the 5 old stars. For him, it is a huge insult. That's the supreme sword, Kanglong. He didn't speak since he appeared, and was looking at Lao Lu's Mido front gate, suddenly pointed at Lao Lu and exclaimed, "You are Liu Shengjian-san." "What? Isn't Liu Shengjian dead? How could it be him? Yagayu Jianzhen has disappeared for 10 years. Hearing this name, even the high 5 old star can't help but lose his temper. In their era, when Roger, the Pirate King, had not yet risen, Liu Shengjianzhen was one of the most dazzling people in the world, the absolute leader of the swordsmanship, even the #1 swordsman in the world today. Hawkeye is not necessarily comparable. Yagayu's sword 3 was stronger at its peak. If it weren't for him disappearing for many years, I'm afraid it would be unknown whether Hawkeye would be able to win the world's greatest swordsman. And now someone told him that this legendary figure actually appeared in front of them, which made them believe it. It's him. I won't admit I'm wrong. Mido Chinwyman swallowed, his face a bit bitter. Remember the time I left 2 years ago, that time I went. Destroy my family, right? Lao Lu. No, it should be Liu Shengjianzhen. Looking at Mido Chinwyman indifferently. Why do you do this? I thought you were dead and wanted to get Blue Dragon. By the way, I want to know why your swordsmanship has improved so fast. Mido Chinwyman smiled bitterly, but his body assumed a fighting posture. Now that he knows that the other party is Liu Shengjianzhen, there is no possibility of any solution at all. Only by killing the other party can he survive. Is that so? Liu Shengyan sighed for a long time. His face was a little lonely. The average person is innocent, but the pregnant woman is guilty. Since you want Kanglong so much, then I will use it to give you a ride. Before the words were finished, Liu Shengjianzhen handed out a sword. Although the speed of the sword was slow, no one dared to despise this sword. Because the opponent is Yagayu Jianzhen, once the greatest swordsman in the world. Kai. A sword pierced out, bringing a scream that pierced the air, and the dazzling sword energy burst out of the air. Wherever it passed, no one could stop it, and everything in the world was shattered. The first style, no sword. Liu Shengjianzhen muttered to himself. Facing this sword, the 5 old stars hurriedly dodged, and then at this moment, Zobok's pupils shrank suddenly, exclaiming at Mido Chinwyman. Be careful. What? Mido Chinwyman subconsciously dodged to the side, and almost at the same time, a sharp blade swiped across his waist, carrying a handful of blood. It was only then that he realized that Yagayu Jianzhen had thrown the Kanglong sword as a hidden weapon under the cover of his sword energy. If it wasn't for Zobak's reminder, this move would have seriously injured him. Hum. A sword cry sounded, and Mito Chinwyman hurriedly turned his head, and a white light flashed in his ear. After the Kanglong poked the ground, it bounced back. In midair, taking the sword with one hand, Yagayu Kenzo stabbed with another sword, targeting the Mito front gate. Second form, holding a sword. Holding the hilt in his hand, Lu Shengjianzhen's aura suddenly rose, his old face radiating bright brilliance like a dead tree in spring, and the next moment he slashed out with a sword. At this time, Zobak and San also understood that Yagayu Kenzo's goal was to kill Mito Frontgate and kill the man who killed his relatives. In this case, the two did not dare to keep their hands, and tried their best to launch an attack. Facing such an attack, Mito Senamon Gate in front also roared and attacked Kenzo Yagayu. Facing the attack from three directions, Liu Shengjianzhen sighed, and the sword force recovered and swept out. The third style, swell. In Jianzhen Lu's eyes, there seemed to be a lofty ambition when he went out to the world and challenged swordsmen in the world in order to improve his swordsmanship when he was young. The sword energy all over his body climbed again, and this sword actually blocked the attacks of the three people at the same time. Fourth style, wasted. The swordsmanship was no longer diligent, and his energy dissipated. An aura that made people feel depressed from the bottom of his heart radiated from the body of Liu Jianzhen. Receiving the impact of this momentum, the movements of the three of Zobak actually appeared slow for a moment. Fifth style, come back. Knowing the Dugu swordsmanship, the swordsmanship broke through again, full of energy, and came to the peak again. Seeing Jianzhen Lu's rising momentum again, the three people present couldn't help but look horrified. Zobak was the first to react, looking at Yanagyu Jianzhen's withered arm and exclaimed, "He's overdrawing his life. Don't fight with him." Mito Chinwyman, who was on the side, shuddered and stepped back. It was only then that he realized that it was true that Liu Jianzhen was once the greatest swordsman in the world, but he was 60 years old, and it was impossible for him to fight for a long time. It's too late. At this time, Lu Shengjianzhen had a withered face and a look of dying, but his eyes were unprecedentedly bright, like the burning sun. Sixth style, return home. Yagayu Jianzhen's hometown has long been destroyed by Mito Chinwyman, and the entire family has been destroyed. The hometown he can return to is only the underworld. Boom! The white light that penetrated the heavens and the earth rose, illuminating the entire Marijoa as if it were daytime. When the white light dissipated, everything around Liu Shengjianzhen was wiped out, and the ground sank several meters deep. Mito Chinwyman groped his body in shock until he confirmed that there were no scars, and then shouted in surprise. "Ha ha ha, it's fine, I'm fine." At this time, he suddenly noticed that Zobak, who was beside him, had a solemn expression, and his hands were trembling. Following Zobak's gaze, Mito Zenamon's pupils shrank suddenly. In the center of the sunken ground, the sword of Yagayu Jianzhen penetrated San's heart. San vomited blood, looked at Liu Shengjianzhen with a face full of unwillingness, and then his head lowered and there was no sound. Liu Shengjianzhen smiled rarely. "I said, as long as you kill any of you, this old man is worth it." Scoff. Pulling out the ancient sword Kanglong, Liu Shengjianzhen coughed twice, bleeding from the corner of his mouth, and looked at Zobak who were terrified and did not dare to approach. He shook his head mockingly. "Such 5 old stars will not rule for long." Picking up Kanglong and gently wiping off the blood on the sword, Liu Shengjianzhen smiled sadly. "Old friend, let's stay here for the rest of our lives, thank you for being with me all the time." With a long sigh, the only remaining sword energy in the body was poured into the sword. The next moment, Liu Shengjianzhen violently threw Kanglong up and let it disappear into the sky as white light. "Go, find your new master, and let the swordsmanship of the Yagayu family continue to be passed down to the world." After doing all this, Jianzhen Luyu looked at the two of them, and shook his head slowly. "I'm waiting for you below." The whispered words dissipated in the air, and Jianzhen Liusheng stood like a javelin, slowly closing his eyes, his chest no longer heaving. I really want to play a game of chess and smoke a bag of cigarettes with my old friends in the village. A generation of swordsmen, Liu Shengjianzhen, died. Distant Chambord Islands. The wine bottle in Rayleigh's hand suddenly fell to the ground and shattered. Staring deeply at the broken wine bottle, Rayleigh looked in the direction of Mary Joa with some melancholy. Old man, you are also dead. With a long sigh, Rayleigh opened a bottle of wine again, took a few sips, and smiled somewhat self-deprecatingly. That's right, the world is young now, and we old guys should step back. Raising the bottle and pouring it in the direction of Mary Joa, a little bit of sparkle gradually appeared in Rayleigh's eyes. I'll give you one last toast. Chapter 124 Heritage and Printing Conan. Port Mary Joa. As the headquarters of the world government, the Holy Land Mary Joa has two huge ports leading to the New World and the first half of the Great Route. Originally the port of the Holy Land, it has always been a bustling commercial area, and there are only a few guards stationed here. But since the last time Tiger made a riot in Mary Joa and many slaves fled by boat, the world government has sent a large number of navies to station here. When Roja and the others arrived at the port to the New World, they saw the wounded and fallen navy all over the port at a glance. Although they were the guards of the Holy Land, their strength was not bad, but in the face of the elites of the Revolutionary Army and the Murlocs of the Sun Pirates, they still ended up being wiped out. You're finally back. As soon as he boarded the boat, Estes came over nervously, ignoring the eyes of others, and touched Roja all over. Okay, don't touch it, I'm fine. It was Roja, who was also blushed by Estes' actions. It's fine, then let's go. Estes kissed Roja's face. Yeah, Roja nodded and started to help Estes direct everyone to sail. At this moment, a streamer suddenly descended from the sky and went straight to Roja's head. Be careful. Estes shouted, waved his arm, and layers of ice appeared instantly, protecting Roja in it. However, the ice that Estes was proud of, was penetrated like a piece of paper before the streamer, and the streamer disappeared into the ice wall. Roja. When Estes unlocked the barrier, at a glance, he saw Roja with an ancient sword in his hand, with a confused look on his face. Are you all right? Estes hurried to Roja's side. It's okay. Roja shook his head, a little confused. Just now he also thought that the sword was going to kill him, but who knew that the sword was actually inserted in front of him? Driven by curiosity, Roja pulled out his sword. This is what Estes saw. Just when Roja and others breathed a sigh of relief, suddenly the sword in Roja's hand was bright, and before Roja could react, a stream of light poured into Roja's body. Boom, boom, dong dong, dong dong dong. The heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and in a few seconds, Roja's face flushed red. Roja, Estes called nervously. Roja, who was stiff all over, shook his head with difficulty, and squeezed two words out of his teeth. Driving the boat. Although Estes was still a little worried, she also saw the joy in Roja's eyes no longer asked to start commanding everyone to prepare for sailing. From time to time, a Murloc came back from the water with a happy face. They were ordered by Estes to scuttle the rest of the ships. It didn't take long for the 5 ships loaded with thousands of slaves to drive down the waterway in a mighty way, and the excited cheers of the slaves could be heard from time to time. They were finally saved. On the other hand, Roja opened the system panel with difficulty after Estes left. Detected the inheritance of soul fragments, whether to absorb it. Close black lens bracket. Unknown energy has been detected, and it is estimated that it may strengthen the ability of the host's body called sword energy. Is it absorbed? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket worn. Worn. Soul fragment inheritance may bring unknown tasks. Only by fulfilling the wishes of the soul master can the inheritance be fully accepted. If it is not completed for a long time, it is likely to have unknown effects on the host soul. Close black lens bracket. Soul fragment inheritance, what is going on? Roja asked in his mind. The inheritance of soul fragments is a person who has achieved extremely high achievements in certain aspects, has a great obsession in his heart, and is an extremely rare item that can only appear when the body dies. It is usually attached to the things around the strong person when he dies. Close black lens bracket. Acquiring inheritance. You can get some of the abilities of the Soul Master. The inheritance of a strong kendo can get some of his kendo experience, and the inheritance of a top navigator can get some of his sailing experience. And so on. Then who's on this sword? After systematic calculation, there is a 99.9% chance that it is the soul fragment of a strong swordsman. Kendo powerhouse. Roha looked at the sword in his hand subconsciously. This is Lao Lu's sword. In other words, Lao Lu is dead. Roha's face dimmed. Although he had not been in contact with Lao Lu for a long time, Lao Lu's easygoing personality was not stingy, and his advice on kendo practice was still very impressive in Roha's heart. After a moment of silence, Roha clicked the absorb option. Even if there is no inheritance, he still wants to help Lao Lu fulfill his last wish. The next moment, a huge force poured into Roha's body. At the same time, a large amount of information rushed into Roha's head arrogantly, and suddenly accepted such a huge flow of information, even Roha was blacked out. While he was in a coma, a new task gradually appeared on the system panel. Inheritance mission. Kill Mido front gate. Reward. Kendo inheritance, Yagayu sword 3. But when Roha was in a coma and the slaves fled to the new world by boat, the pot on Mary Joa's side had already exploded. General Qingji disappeared, Gang Wukong was seriously injured and unconscious, and one of the 5 old stars died in battle. This kind of news made it hard for everyone to believe. 343. You must know, that was the combat power of the 3 generals, and they were all defeated by the opponent. Especially the 5 old stars, the ruler of the world actually died, how can they keep calm? The world government, while shocked, also held an emergency meeting. In the end, it was unanimously decided that the army must be dispatched to pursue the escaped slave fleet, and Aokiji is likely to be captured by the opponent. However, in the pursuit of candidates, they encountered difficulties. For no other reason, the strength of the slave fleet is too strong. All I know is Dorag, the Sun Pirates, and the mysterious man who seriously injured Cyborg. Sending a general to go, can't beat it at all. Sending 2, Akainu is still investigating the secret of the riot of the 100 Beast Pirates, and there is no way to do it. In the end, it was Sengoku himself who went out and asked Garp and Crane to help, plus Kizaru who had nothing to do, and that was enough people. On the other hand, after receiving the notice from Estes, the Seven Waters capital also started intensive preparations. Various printing houses are busy working overtime to reprint comics. This time, the cover of the comic is no longer a character with red eyes, but a primary school student in uniform and glasses. Chapter 125. Little Fangirl, Hancock. In the early morning of the next day, countless messenger gulls rose from all over the world, and the whole world was reporting this Mary Joa incident. There is no way, this time the facts are too big, and there are too many navies participating in this news, and there are too many people talking. In the end, the world government could only conceal some of the truth, reduce the number of casualties and the number of escaped slaves, and turn Roha and others away swaggeringly into being chased by naval forces and fleeing in embarrassment. Although such reports can deceive ordinary people and save a part of their face, they are useless to those who care. Great Root, Whitebeard Pirates. On the deck of the Moby Dick, the crew members gathered together in 2s and 3s, reading the newly bought newspapers, and from time to time there were lively discussions. The guys from the Revolutionary Army did a good job. A crew member held a newspaper with a longing look on his face, to make a fuss at the world government headquarters, to compete with Cyborg, Aokiji, and 5 old stars, just think about it. I feel so good if I go too. Just you. Come on, if you go, it is estimated that the general will be killed in seconds, and the body will not be found, ha ha ha. A crew member patted the other's shoulder and laughed and laughed. Yeah, that's Mary Joa. What can you do when you go there? I think it's all right for the captains to go. If Dad goes too, maybe it will destroy the entire Mary Joa and make the world government's memory. Looking at the discussions of the group of companions, Marco smiled and read the newspaper in his hand again. The more he read, the more he felt that something was wrong. Dad, what happened to Mary Joa this time is a bit strange. Marco held the newspaper in his hand, with a puzzled look on his face. According to the newspaper, there are dozens of intruders this time. Shirtag broke into Mary Joa alone, which is understandable, but this time so many people got in. No matter how you think it is impossible. Gu la 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 tilde it's really impossible, but in this world, there are a few more guys with special abilities, and it's normal to help them. Whitebeard laughed, then picked up the wine barrel and drank it stand up. It can be seen that the world government was beaten in the face, which made Whitebeard very happy. A guy with special abilities. Devil fruit. Marco pondered, and finally fixed his eyes on the mysterious man who defeated Cyborg. Marco had a gut feeling that this man was the culprit in this incident. The Sun Pirates have the idea of rescuing slaves, everyone knows this, but they are too weak to infiltrate Marijoa again. As for the connection with the Revolutionary Army, it is unlikely. The scope of the Revolutionary Army's activities has always been outside the New World, and the two are fundamentally inseparable. Then this mysterious man must be the key to everything. But, what is the ability to send so many people into Mary Joa? Marco couldn't help but walk into the cabin, took out the devil fruit illustration book treasured in the group, and began to look at it. Yeah. New World, home of the beast pirates. Tilda. Let dozens of people sneak into Mary Joa's special ability. Kaido's huge body is sitting on a special chair, his head is lowered, and his face is contemplative. Such an ability always gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity, but he just couldn't remember where he had seen it. At this moment, the door of the room was opened, and Jack, whose blood was still on his body, walked in with a rumble, and knelt down in front of Kaido on one knee. My lord, the G5 fleet has been defeated by the three of us, but because Sakazuki came halfway, it was not completely wiped out. Kaido nodded slowly, and out of the corner of his eyes glanced at Jack kneeling on the ground, and lightning flashed in his mind. Jack, how did the guy who sneaked into the lab last time get in? When Jack heard Kaido mention this again, he couldn't help shaking, and his head lowered lower. Sir, I don't know how he got in. He just appeared out of nowhere, and then disappeared out of nowhere. Disappeared out of thin air. Kaido's face suddenly darkened. Jack. Big, sir. Jack shivered and responded with some horror, for fear that Kaido would beat him again because he thought of the laboratory. Notify everyone. Get ready to go to sea. Kaido stood up aggressively. The shadow from his tall body covered Jack, who was kneeling on the ground. Come with me to intercept the slaves who escaped from Mary Joa. The guy who ransacked the lab last time is probably inside. That guy. Jack was stunned, then nodded heavily. Yes. Great route, no wind. This is the lair of large sea kings, a place of fear in the world, but in this quiet sea area, there is a race of all women living here. That is the 9 snakes who live on Daughter Island, Amazon Lily. In the palace in the center of Daughter's Island, on the seat made of circling snakes, there is a peerless beauty lying on the side. Long black hair, white and delicate skin, extremely delicate facial features, coupled with her enchanting figure, with a slight movement, the towering chest will tremble, just looking at it will make people feel incomparable. Satisfy. However, at this moment, this peerless beauty is holding a newspaper and browsing quietly, but her fingernails that are a little white due to excessive force indicate that her heart is not as calm as the surface. Mary Joa. Slave rescue incident. Hancock murmured to himself in a trembling voice, with indescribable excitement in his tone, someone has boarded Mary Joa again. The leader of the Sun Pirates, the Revolutionary Army, and the mysterious person who is likely to be the mastermind behind the scenes. Hancock looked at the speculations of a group of analysts. The more he looked, the more excited he became, and finally stood up abruptly. Guards. The guard who had been waiting outside the door immediately walked in. Sir Snake G, what are your orders? Call the soldiers of the 9 snake pirates immediately, I want to go to sea. Hancock said excitedly. Going to sea. Boya Sandersonia and Boya Marigold were taken aback as they walked in with the guards. Sister, didn't we just come back? Where are we going? Sandersonia asked quickly. I'm going to the New World to see who is making a fuss about Mary Joa. Hancock clenched the newspaper in his hand, and there was a hint of admiration in his eyes. She had to see who it was, who dared to be the enemy of the Tianlong people and planned this Mary Joa incident. But, Marigold hesitated a bit, but sister, we have just returned, the soldiers are resting, isn't it bad to set off now? It doesn't matter, let them prepare immediately. No matter what the concubine does, she will be forgiven. Hancock's eyes narrowed slightly, and his fingers gently ran across his neck, passing her delicate red lips, because the concubine. It's so beautiful. Yeah. Sister. Several people present were fascinated by Hancock's charming gesture and screamed excitedly. Looking at the few people who went to gather the soldiers, Hancock twitched the corners of his mouth. What will the master who planned the plan look like? Chapter 126 New Skills, New Comics. Just when the eyes of the world were paying attention to this Marijoya incident, Roja, who was the initiator, woke up leisurely. Slowly opening his eyes, Roja wanted to sit up, but just as he moved, there was a tingling pain in his head, which made him snort. For the first time, he encountered the forced infusion of soul and spirit, which made him a little unable to recover. On the other side, Estes, who had been lying by Roja's window, was awakened by Roja's groan. When she saw Roja wake up, she exclaimed and threw herself into Roja's arms. You're finally awake. Estes' face was full of joy. How are you? Are you okay? Is there any discomfort in your body? Cough cough. Roja rubbed his head with a headache, and patted Estes with his backhand. It's all right, where are we now? I am wandering at sea. Recently, a few groups of navies have appeared behind them. They are very strong and have never been thrown away. Estes stood up, picked up a bowl of porridge from the table beside him, and fed Roja while telling him about the recent changes. In fact, Roja wanted to eat it by himself, but he didn't say anything when he saw Estes' happy face. It turned out that he had been in a coma for 3 days 893. During these 3 days, the Navy had been pursuing him all the time. At first, Estes also sent Murlocs to scuttle several of the others' ships, but after Kizaru, Karp and others arrived, never succeeded again. During the period, the two sides fought several times, but because Estes did not dare to do it because of Roja's order, and only Drago and others could not defeat the other party, so these battles were all defeated and fled as a result. What is puzzling is that the fleet led by Garp and others will release water every time they fight. Even if they can intercept a slave ship sometimes, they will not intercept it, but are inexplicably run away by the slave ship. Hearing this, Roja couldn't help hooking the corners of his mouth. With Garp's temper, it's definitely impossible to really intercept the slave ship. I'm afraid it's just pretending, and finally accidentally chase it. As for Kizaru, of course that guy is lazy if he can, and doesn't care about anything. It is impossible to remove him from the position of general. After asking some details again, Estes took the bowl and walked out. In the room, Roja lay on the bed again and closed his eyes. It was the end of the month when Mary Joa moved, and he was in a coma for 3 more days, and it was already a new month. He hasn't drawn this month's comics, and he hasn't read the earnings yet. Clicking on the system panel, Roja couldn't help but smile when he saw the fan value column. 13 million. This is the fan value he has gained in the past 3 months, especially in the last month. He has gained a full fan value of 6 million. It seems that the effect of the single-line book and the sister is not bad. Roja said with a little satisfaction. In the early comics, due to the insufficient circulation of Dream magazine, the scope of dissemination was limited to the Great Root, so that many later readers could not see the early comics at all. W_Kai. However, after having a single book, there is no such problem. The new fans of Dream magazine have bought it, and eventually become fans of the comics, so the increase in fan value is also expected by Roja. After gaining a lot of fan value, his cartoonist level has also been successfully upgraded to the 3rd level. The 3rd level skill tree opens, and 2 new skills appear. Absolutely calm. After opening, nothing can affect your spirit, keep absolutely calm. Open black lens bracket. Whereabouts are hidden. Close black lens bracket, sending blades. It doesn't exist, you can't find me at all. Looking at these 2 skills, Roja couldn't help but fell into contemplation. The description of the system is as pitiful as ever. This absolute calm is likely to be similar to the magical skill, Mechanized Mind, in the D&D series. The hidden effect is estimated to be immune to all negative effects that disturb the mind, and even emotions such as negativity, sadness, and anger can be offset. If this skill is used, it is estimated that Perona's negative ghost will not have any effect on him. The second, whereabouts are hidden. Looking at the description of the system, Roja was a little speechless. The pit system, what's so funny at this time? However, according to Roja's guess, the hidden effect should be a means of hiding breath and the like. As for the effect, the urine quality produced by the system must be a fine product. I am afraid the effect is very good. After a little hesitation, Roja added the skill point to absolute calmness. With his current strength, stealth assassination is a waste of time. After clicking on the skills, Roja just wanted to extract this month's comics, and suddenly skimmed to the taskbar, and a task flashed with golden light. That's a sign of mission completion. Which task has been completed? Roja raised his eyebrows and opened the taskbar. Side quest, cartoonist equals local tyrant. Finish. Close black lens bracket. It turned out to be this. Roja couldn't help but be happy. He didn't forget that the reward for this quest is the chance to draw a high-level lottery in the designated world. A few minutes later, Roja was holding a rustic earthenware pot, speechless for a while, and his face was full of disappointment. It's actually a fairy bean. Although Shondo is a bug-level drug in the Dragon Ball world, as long as you take 1 pill, you can quickly heal internal and external injuries, and you will not be hungry for 10 days, and the most important thing is that the effect of Shondo, no matter how strong the user is, all the same. In Dragon Ball comics, even if you are as strong as a Saiyan, if you eat a fairy bean, you can instantly be full of blood and blue, which is called an invincible medicine. But, then there must be someone who can hurt Roja. Now, with full firepower, there is no one who can beat him seriously and take medicine. He's basically useless. Okay. It's okay to give a turtle qigong. Alas, it's getting worse. With a sigh, Roja casually extracted this month's comics. He no longer had any expectations of his own luck. The familiar light flashed, and 3 cards floated in front of Roja. Ignoring the other 2 cards, Roja's eyes locked on the middle card. Open black lens bracket. Fate-stay night. Close black lens bracket. Actually Fate-stay night, the one by Shuru Emiya. The ability to pierce the dead thorn, the infinite sword system, and the 12 trials appeared in Roja's mind. Be sure to draw this. Roja made a decision in his heart. Just have to wait until things are over here. Thinking of this, Roja couldn't help but look out the window. Speaking of which, Conan should have been released for 2 days. I don't know how much attention can be diverted from the Navy. If Sengoku knew Roja's question, he would definitely pick up Roja's collar and tell him angrily. Because of your broken comics, the old man can't even sleep well. Chapter 127. Sengoku tortured by Conan. Naval Headquarters, Marin Vando. Zephyr came to the marshal's office. This time he wanted to talk to Warring States about the matter of coaching again. His injury has long since recovered, and he can't wait any longer. Boom, boom, boom. After knocking on the door a few times, Zephyr waited quietly at the door. Even if he knew Sengoku very well, he still had to have the most basic manners. Garp was a minority after all. 10 seconds have passed. Half a minute has passed. Not here. Zephyr raised his eyebrows and knocked on the door a few more times. This time Zephyr waited for 2 minutes, but still did not respond. No, I haven't heard of a meeting recently. Zephyr recalled with a frown, but there was no need for Warring States to leave the office in his memory. As a naval marshal, Warring States would not leave the office easily, otherwise, if there is something urgent to report, but he cannot be found, it is easy for a major incident to happen. Zephyr stood there and hesitated for a while, and finally reached out and tried to push the door of the office. Click _. Unexpectedly, the door was not locked, and it was pushed open by Zephyr. It's not locked, it's not sleeping. Zephyr pushed open the door, walked in, and saw at a glance that he was lying on the table, covered by thick documents, only revealing the Warring States above his head. Huh, it's Zephyr. Hearing the sound of the door being pushed open, Warring States slowly raised his head and greeted Zephyr. When he saw the appearance of the Warring States period, Zephyr was shocked. Warring States, how long have you not slept? At this time in the Warring States period, with 2 thick dark circles under his eyes, his face was pale, his spirit was lethargic, and he looked like he was about to die suddenly. Sleep. Sengoku shook his head, took the calendar beside him with a confused look, and looked at the clock on the wall. Number 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't slept for 48 or 9 hours. Warring States smiled and waved at Chong Zephyr. It's only been over 2 days. I think back when I was sailing, chasing pirates for days and nights is a common occurrence. If you can't die, you can't die. Number 2. Hearing the words of Warring States, Zephyr covered his face speechlessly, stepped forward, and snatched the calendar from Warring States' hands. Rip _. Directly tore off a page of the calendar, Zephyr pointed to the number 3 above, and shouted at the Warring States. You bastard, show me a good look, it's number 3 now. Number 3, you have worked for more than 70 years. I haven't slept for an hour. I'm courting you. If the dignified admiral died suddenly because of staying up late, I am afraid that the entire world government will be reduced to a joke. You, quickly put me to sleep. Zephyr pointed to the sofa beside him and shouted excitedly to the Warring States. No, I can't sleep. Warring States shook his head slowly. While he muttered, he picked up a pen and wrote something on the paper. The analysis work has not been finished yet. It must be done as soon as possible, otherwise someone will be killed. Boom. Suddenly, Zhongguo rolled his eyes and fell heavily on the desk, but Zephyr was too lazy to ink with him, and directly knocked Zhongguo unconscious. After gently picking up Sengoku and placing it on the sofa, Zephyr covered Sengoku with a navy cape. You guy, you really don't want to die at work. Seeing Sengoku, who had fallen asleep and snored after a while, Zephyr smiled helplessly. After dealing with the Warring States, Zephyr walked to the desk. He wanted to see what it was that could make the Warring States work so hard. Murdering method reasoning, criminal summary, simple measures to prevent crime. What is this? Looking at the thick stack of documents full of words, Zephyr couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth. He has only been recuperating from a serious injury for a few months. Why can't he keep up with the rhythm of the Warring States? Now killing people rely on these secret room organs or something. To study what these things that can only kill ordinary people do, it is not enough to have naval control. At this moment, Zephyr suddenly saw several thick comics placed next to the document. The top one had been opened, and it looked like the Warring States period was reading and writing the document. Warring States still see this thing. Zephyr turned his head to look at the sleeping Warring States period, took out the comic and sat on the chair to read it. Anyway, the Warring States period has to sleep for a while, just to pass the time. Detective Conan. After reading the name of the comic word by word, Zephyr frowned. What is a detective? The kid on the cover is a detective. Zephyr, who was aroused by curiosity, just sat there and watched. Zephyr didn't expect that it would take him 2 hours to look at it. Just when he saw Conan Dizzy Mori Kogoro, hiding behind the sofa, ready to solve the case, suddenly a hand reached out and patted his shoulder. Wait a while, I'm seeing a critical moment. I'll talk about it later. Zephyr shook his shoulders impatiently. A few seconds later, Zephyr suddenly reacted, turned his head and saw that Warring States was standing behind him, looking at him helplessly. You guy, although you are kind, you won't knock me out. Warring States twisted his neck, which was still aching, with a helpless expression on his face. Zephyr was a general after all, and he was afraid that the Warring States would not be knocked out, but he had used some strength just now, and the Warring States was still a little slow. Ha ha, aren't you afraid that you won't go to bed? Zephyr sneered a few times and quietly put the comic aside. Have you read this too? Warring States saw the cartoon on the table, and his eyes fluctuated. I was a little bored just now, so I picked it up and took a look. Zephyr responded casually, never mentioning his fascination. Well, then you can see the problem. Warring States sighed, his expression suddenly gloomy. Problem? Zephyr raised his eyebrows. Isn't this the comic? What's the problem? Sure enough. Zephyr's answer was not what Warring States expected. When he saw this comic, he didn't think too much about it, he just regarded it as an ordinary comic. But who would have thought that the consequences of this comic would be so big, and it is still unbelievable until now in the Warring States period. In the 3 days since the comic was released, 17 nobles died, 3 Tianlong people died, the heir of a certain country in the south died, and the patriarch of the third mafia family in the West Sea died. However, so far, less than 20 murderers have been caught, and the rest have never been caught. It's even said that some of the deceased have been judged to commit suicide. Hee, the heir of the kingdom committed suicide in his own bath, who would believe it? Chapter 128 Discussion about Conan. Warring States looked at Zephyr and muttered a little self-deprecatingly. In addition to these, hundreds of criminals who had a criminal record and were eventually found not guilty have died. Although there are only a handful of cases of ordinary people dying, it is not without them. Now, you know what's wrong with this comic. Sengoku looked at the cartoon on the table with a gloomy expression on his face. It's all from the comics. Even Zephyr had a cold sweat on his back after hearing the terrifying data. The death of ordinary people is nothing, but the death of so many nobles and leaders of forces is too terrifying. And it's only in 3 days, if it's months, maybe even years. This time, Zephyr looked at the comic with no appreciation, but with deep fear, as if this comic could make the whole world a mess. It would be great if they were all the methods in the comics. Warring States sighed. The prisoners caught were all because of poor methods, even the methods in the comics were inferior. However, more killing methods are more perfect than those in the comics. I personally saw the case of the death of the heir to the West Sea, and asked the local person in charge to use a camera phone to take pictures of the crime scene bit by bit, but even me, I couldn't see any doubts. The person who started the attack is too clever, and he can't find any loopholes in a short period of time. The only thing I can be sure of is that he was definitely inspired by the killing methods in the comics, and he did it after studying for a long time, in order to ensure that I won't get caught myself. Innocent murder, Zephyr murmured in a low voice. Yes, that's it, innocent murder. Sengoku casually sat on the desk, picked up the famous Detective Conan comic, and held it in front of him. This comic is the source of the idea of innocent murder in those murderers. The guy who originally had some murderous thoughts, but was worried about being caught afterwards, after reading this comic, suddenly found out that there is such a way of killing, without having a strength far beyond ordinary people, let alone passing through layers of guards. As long as you make some arrangements, you can kill people. Quote. The most important thing is that you won't be caught after killing someone. Saying that, the Warring States turned to look at Zephyr. If it were you, would you die for this manga, and then use it to kill people who you want to kill every day and night? Hearing the question from the Warring States period, Zephyr's expression froze for a while, but he actually thought about it seriously, and finally he nodded solemnly. Yes. Tilda. Hey, Warring States laughed at himself. You are all like this, not to mention those murderers, I am afraid that they are now immersed in the thrill of innocent murder, while planning the next crime, while putting this comic as a canon. Since this comic is so dangerous, why don't the relevant newspapers stop printing it? Then a local garrison is launched to take back all the comics. Zephyr tried to find a solution to the problem. I also thought about this method, but after thinking about it, it's just a temporary solution, not the root cause. Warring States shook his head. Now that people have discovered a new method of killing, even if they take back the comics, they will continue to study on this road. Down. Instead of taking back the comics rashly, let it continue to be released, and let those guys lock the killing methods in the comics. Even if they develop a more perfect method, they can't escape the traces of the methods in the comics, so we can still catch it. A little. Speaking of this, Sengoku suddenly curled his lips. Of course, there is another reason why the manga of Detective Conan is not banned from continuing to be released. What's the reason? Zephyr looked at the Warring States curiously. Because it was released by the Dimensional Brigade. Warring States said helplessly. Dimension Brigade. Hearing the name, Zephyr couldn't help being silent. In the past year, he has heard this name countless times. When someone says this name, it is often accompanied by nouns such as powerful, mysterious, unknown, wealthy, dream magazine, etc., and of course, security. That's right, it is the duty of security. In this world where strength is respected, the strong are powerful, and the sea is disturbed, there is actually such a force that is linked to the duty of security. At the beginning, Zephyr didn't believe that such a big force as the Dimensional Brigade could honestly not cause trouble. But in the end, he could only reluctantly admit that the Dimension Brigade was really a wonderful thing. He has the level of the 4 Emperor Pirates, and even the power above that, but he does nothing. The only action is to keep publishing one comic after another. Although every comic of the Dimension Brigade will have a certain impact on the world, it is nothing compared to the Big Mom pirates who move and kill the country, and the Beast pirates who attack the navy. If such a well-behaved force blocked their only hobby, Zephyr really couldn't imagine how outrageous the other party would do. The 5 Emperor Pirates. The term suddenly popped up in his mind, and the startled Zephyr shivered. This must not happen. Draw manga, as long as you don't fight against the world government. Thinking of this, Zephyr couldn't help but look at the Warring States with some sympathy. The Dimension Brigade kept looking for trouble for him, but he couldn't move the other party at all. In the heart of the Warring States period, he probably hated the Dimension Brigade. Hey, that's not right. Zephyr suddenly remembered. Isn't the fantasy magazine once a week? Why is this comic suddenly updated to 0.0 so much? Who knows what they thought? This comic was not published in the magazine at all, but appeared directly in a one-line version, and it was 5 copies at a time. Warring States shook his head, expressing puzzlement. Okay, I also know what you are doing here. I'll give you the order in a while. Let's go. I have to finish writing the documents related to the case-solving analysis and send them out as soon as possible. Warring States patted Zephyr on the shoulder and ordered the expulsion. Okay. Zephyr nodded and walked out the door. Before leaving, he did not forget to take a cartoon from the Warring States table. Walking in the corridor, Zephyr couldn't wait to take out the comic and read it. Where did you just see it? Chapter 129 Dragon Man Driven Mad by Conan. The Holy City of Mary Joa. After a war, Mary Joa no longer has the prosperity it once had. On the once bustling streets, there are only a handful of pedestrians, and occasionally a large number of people pass by, but they are just naval patrols or workers rebuilding the city. This kind of desertion is not all because of the Mary Joa incident, but more because of the itchy cartoon that made Tianlong people hate. In a fruit shop on the side of the street, a girl in a maid outfit was picking at the stall. From time to time, she would say something to the salesman, as if they were bargaining, and the patrolling passing by just glanced at them. Will no longer be concerned. Wearing such maid costumes, they are often maids in various Tianlong people's families. Those who stand out from many slaves often have the identity of Tianlong people's bed companions, which are not something they can look at will. However, what the patrol team never expected was that the maid and the clerk were not bargaining at all, but exchanging information. The Famro family leader has been obsessed with female fitness recently. The eldest son left Mary Joa yesterday and went to the South China Sea. The eldest daughter will attend the banquet at Edge Jim's house tomorrow. The maid lowered her head and spoke out an 11 series of information at a very fast rate. And the clerk is shouting things like, "It can't be cheap. This is the lowest price, miss. We are a good product from the New World." Covering up for the girl. A few minutes later, the girl raised her head, carried the fruit in the basket, and took out the money with satisfaction. "Irene, is it really worth it? You're going to die." The clerk looked at the girl with regret while taking the money. "Just die. On the first day I was treated as a slave, I lost hope in this world. Now, I have the opportunity to be buried with a Tianlong person, and I am very satisfied." The girl shook her head nonchalantly, took the change, turned around and left. After walking a few steps, she suddenly turned around and smiled sweetly. The smile on her face was ordinary sunshine, dazzling, and her mouth opened and closed. What she said. "Live well." The clerk pretended to be shy and hurriedly lowered his head, his face extremely heavy. In this city, there are many slaves like them who plan to kill the dragon people. Some people had an accident before they started to act, and were executed by the Tianlong people, some died in action, and more were preparing silently, preparing to bring a Tianlong person to die together. Standing by the window, staring at Irene walking out of the fruit shop, the white-haired Saint H. Jim shook his head and turned around. K. Yin Chan. On the streets now, there are a lot fewer maids who buy things like this. The Navy soldiers next to him hurriedly pulled up a chair for Saint H. Jim and let him sit down. Kai. Looking at the clumsy Navy soldier, Holy Edge Jim opened his mouth, but in the end he didn't say anything, just sighed silently. Recently, the number of deaths of nobles has increased sharply. Just a few days ago, there was another incident of slave assassination of Tianlong people. Although it was unsuccessful in the end, and the relevant slaves were all executed, it still made the whole Marijoa panic. These slaves who were not rescued were completely insane. The frightened Tianlong family did not dare to let slaves serve themselves, and instead asked the world government for some naval soldiers, but these guys are really stupid. Looking at the tea that was so hot that he couldn't put his mouth down, Saint H. Jim twitched the corners of his mouth and looked irritated, but he calmed down a little when he saw the person opposite him. "I didn't expect you to come to see me at this time." Hearing this, Saint Roswald, who had been sitting opposite him tasting the cakes, smiled and put down the cakes. "What are these? Some slaves are just messing up. I believe that with the means of Saint Ejim, they will soon be calmed down." Quote. Seeing Saint Eichjim, who couldn't help laughing because of his compliment, Saint Roswald smiled and turned his head away to prevent the other party from noticing his dangerous expression. Although the Tianlong people are generally not good, there are still some smart people among them, and this Saint Eichijim in front of him is one of them. As the eldest Draconian, and the patriarch of the Ekijim family, Saint Ekijim's power is beyond imagination, and even when necessary, he can influence 1/3 of the opinions of the Draconian family. "If I can kill this guy." Saint Roswald's eyes couldn't help showing a trace of killing intent. "Saint Roswald, what's the matter with you?" Saint Eichijim keenly noticed the changes in Saint Roswald and asked with concern. Even if Sage Echjim had ruled the dragon family for many years, he would never have imagined that there would be a dragon who would want to kill each other. "Oh, nothing, I just thought of the 4 honorable companions who died during this time, and felt unworthy for them." Saint Roswald clenched his hands tightly, and the expression on his face suddenly turned hideous. To die in the ***** in the hands of slaves. Yeah, damn slave. The mention of this Saint Akijim also sparked a trace of anger in his heart. In this short period of time, even he was attacked twice. Although he killed most of the slaves in a fit of rage, the other party's death before he died. The look still made him uncomfortable. It was a look full of hatred, madness, and finally liberation, not even the craziest martyr. Can't we ban that comic? Or directly launch a naval fleet to annihilate the so-called Dream Brigade? Saint Roswald, I understand your feelings, not only you, but also someone in the other families mentioned this to me, but... Saint Ichjean sighed, his face suddenly darkened. No. Quote. It can be seen that Jim Saint is also very helpless to these pig teammates. It would be fine if it was just one or two, but it would be annoying if half of the Tianlong people thought so. Different from those short-sighted Tianlong people, Saint Akijin sees farther. Today, the rule of the world government seems to be stable, but it is actually declining. At this juncture, provoking the Dimensional Brigade will only make things worse. What's more, how to annihilate? Today's world government simply can't vacate manpower, unless... 5. No, the 4 old stars can make a move together. That won't work, that won't work. Are we going to endure it like that? Endure those goddamn pariahs, goddamn slaves stepping on our heads? How long are you going to endure it, Edgejim? Saint Roswald roared, he even omitted the holy word for honor. Chapter 130 Roja vs. Iokiji. Saint Roswald, pay attention to the tone of your speech. Saint Ejim's face suddenly darkened. This is not your home, and I am not your slave. If you are talking like that, then please leave. HMPH, just leave. I originally thought you could have some unique insights, but now it seems that you don't deserve to enjoy the glory now. Saint Roswald snorted coldly, turned around and left. Behind him, Jim Saint was also very angry with him. His old face flushed red, his chest heaved violently, and he didn't recover until a few minutes later. Looking at the direction in which Saint Roswald was leaving, Saint Achjean gritted his teeth and spat out 2 words. Stupid. Originally, he thought that Saint Roswald, who frequently visited various families during this time, would be an ambitious and intelligent person, but now it seems that he is simply a wise fool. It's ridiculous that such a person wants to stand in the same position as him. Outside the courtyard, Saint Roswald got into the carriage angrily and closed the door with a bang. No one noticed that the anger on Roswald Sand's face quickly dissipated after he stepped into the car door. Quietly glanced at the villa, and the joy of victory appeared on Saint Roswald's face. The skills taught by the gods are really useful. Now that old guy from Edgejim shouldn't doubt me. Then who should be killed next? Saint Roswald took out a small notebook and began to plan. Kill the Famro kid first. Or the old woman from the Karens. No, 3 people have been killed during this time, and it is easy to be discovered if you kill again. Let's talk about it after a while. Closing the book, Saint Roswald lowered his head reverently. Lord God, I will definitely complete the great cause you entrusted to me. The Great Root, an unknown island in the New World. On a beach, 2 figures shuttled through it, constantly colliding. Sword energy flutters and ice spreads. Centering on the place where the 2 fought, the area of 100 meters has already turned into a Jedi. Any animal that accidentally enters by mistake will be accidentally injured by the aftermath of the 2's fight. Instant death. Ice Cube 2 spears. The green pheasant waved his hand, and several halberd-like long hairs took shape in an instant, roaring and shooting at Roja. In the face of the ice spear that was shot at a high speed, Roja did not dodge or evade, and rushed forward. The knife in his hand was just a random wave. The ice spear flying in the front rotated half a circle in the air, and hit the ice spear behind. Superior. Click. Several ice spears collided, shattering inch by inch, turning into a cloud of ice mist. The next moment, Roja's figure pierced out of the ice fog and rushed towards the green pheasant like a sharp sword. Gop Shan. Under the blessing of the liberation of the stigmata, his speed was extremely fast, and even brought out a series of afterimages. Percent. Alternative. And GT. The wind visible to the naked eye formed around him, which was the resistance brought by the atmosphere to him, which meant that Roja's speed could really break through the speed of sound as long as he increased it by 1 layer. Boom boom boom. In the face of Roha's understatement of breaking the two thorn spears, Aokiji's face showed a look of surprise. However, for this situation, he seemed to have expected it. After shooting the first wave of ice spears, he kept moving, and shot a series of ice spears. Finally, he even slammed his right arm and shot a huge ice bird. Ice cubes, pheasant mouth. Roha rushed out of the ice fog, and what he saw was the ice spears in the sky, and the ice giant bird that followed. Interesting. Roha raised his eyebrows and didn't mean to stop at all. He suddenly retracted the knife to his side, the muscles of his right arm suddenly bulged, and the next moment, he swung the knife horizontally. Scoff. The huge white sword chi burst out in response, the extreme speed coupled with the drawing of the sword that broke the sound barrier. Almost at the moment when the sword was drawn, a storm appeared out of thin air, blowing the ice spear into a slanted rain, followed by the sword chi more. It was like destroying everything in front of him, pulling out a 100-meter-long trench on the ground. The power of this sword is terrifying. After destroying everything in front of him, Roha frowned and subconsciously drew his knife to the back of his body. However, the moment before his action, the green pheasant had appeared beside him like a ghost, spread his fingers, and a line of ice was connected to Roha in an instant. Frozen time capsule. The ultimate move that once trapped the Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters, the giant Saoluo. In the next second, the icy and biting breath spread all over Roha's body, instantly freezing Roha into a humanoid sculpture. Aokiji smiled slightly, and just wanted to praise Roha a few words, but he was shocked to find that he was speechless. At this time, he discovered that he didn't know when. A long knife penetrated his Adam's apple, and the entire neck subconsciously turned into an elemental ice state, naturally unable to make any sound. Taking 2 steps back hastily, Qingzi covered his throat with a look of horror on his face. The sword that pierced his throat just now was just an ordinary sword. Crack, knock, underscore. A sound of ice shattering sounded, freezing Roha's ice, and countless cracks appeared in an instant, and then Roha walked out of the ice with a smile on his face. Concession. Roha bowed his hands, expressing his satisfaction with his performance just now. Your swordsmanship is getting stronger and stronger. Aokiji shook his head with a bitter look on his face. At first, when Roha approached him to hone his swordsmanship, Aokiji was a little contemptuous. Even if he has not practiced swordsmanship, he has played against countless swordsmen. From Roha's reaction during battle, it can be seen that Roha is only the level of a swordsman. But now, thinking of this, Aokiji twitched the corners of his mouth. Are the people in the Dimension Brigade so terrifying? In less than a week, he crossed the limit of the swordsman, coupled with that terrifying physical fitness. At this time, Roha, in the eyes of Aokiji, has become a veritable monster. It's okay. Roha hooked the corner of his mouth. Although he absorbed part of Kenzo Yagayu Kensen's kendo experience, he would not naively think that he was able to kill the general-level Aokiji so easily. The reason for winning this time was due to Aokiji's negligence. Uncle, big brother, the meat is ready, it's time for lunch. Suddenly there was a young girl's cry in the distance, and when she turned her head, it turned out that it was Leah, the younger sister of the pair of sisters who followed Aokiji, who came to invite them to dinner. The green pheasant on the side saw the little girl, and couldn't help exuding a warm smile, and waved his hand high, indicating that he knew. Are you really going? Roha asked suddenly. Take the 2 of them. Well, I want to help the 2 of them find their parents, and take a good look at the world by the way. Qingzi replied lightly. But there is one more sentence that he didn't say, that is, what is the justice that he wants to find that is really worth upholding? For this reason, he was willing to leave the Navy. Chapter 131 Conquer the City, Estes. Back to the beach where the fleet was docked, the beach at this time was full of black crowds. From time to time, some murlocs returned from the water with baskets of fresh sea fish, and occasionally a few murlocs returned carrying a giant fish, causing a group of cheers. Although the food was humble, there was a happy smile on everyone's face. These people who were once enslaved by the Tianlong people have experienced the darkest time in the world, and they no longer thirst for everything. Now they are very satisfied with the lunch of noodles and fish soup. Roja saw Estes sitting on the boat at a glance, and with a little footstep, he appeared beside Estes in the next moment. After taking the food that Estes handed over, Roja was not polite, and ate it with a big mouthful. After everyone finished eating, Tiger scratched his head and said a little embarrassedly, "The Navy hasn't appeared in the past few days. It seems that the pursuit is abandoned, so I want to take some of my clan and send them back." Fishman Island. "Me too," Drago said immediately. "In the next few days, the support troops of the Revolutionary Army will arrive. At that time, I plan to divide everyone into parts and go back together." After the two finished speaking, they looked at Roja together. After all, the success of this operation largely relied on the abilities of Roja and Estes, and finally the ownership of slaves should also be controlled by Roja. Hearing this, Roja couldn't help touching his chin and thinking. In the past few days, they have made statistics. Among the slaves, only about 1/5 of the people want to go home, and the remaining 4/5 are either homeless or have been exterminated by the Tianlong people. Among these people, in addition to more than 200 beautiful women and children of all ages, there are nearly 600 people. 600 guys with good combat power. It is also true that most of the people who can successfully board the ship and escape under the siege of the Navy have good strength. Even if they don't have two brushes, their physical fitness is not much worse. Among these people alone, Roja found 6 devil fruit-capable people, a swordsman, and the remaining murlocs, furs, long-handed, and long-legged fighting races are countless, even here. Among them, Roja also found a big man with a height of more than 5 meters and a giant blood. When the big man was found at that time, it happened that the other party was fishing with an anchor, and when he watched the other party throw the anchor out, hooked on the shark, and pulled it back hard, Roja almost laughed. If this is wearing an iron diving suit, isn't it a deep-sea titan? To be honest, Roja is quite envious of these 600 people. With the ability of this group of people, coupled with the hatred of the world government, with a little training, they can immediately fill the shadow and expand his power a little bit. It's just that you can't let Drago not take any oil and water, can you? At this moment, Roja suddenly turned to Estes, who was sitting beside him with a boring face, and a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind. "Estes, do you want to pull up an army and go to war?" Roja asked suddenly. Fighting. Estes immediately became energetic and excited. "With whom? Where? How to fight? Where is my army?" Estes excitedly hugged Roja's neck and pressed him to his chest, blushing. "I know you're good to me. What's going on? Tell me quickly." Cough cough cough. The two of Dorag turned back awkwardly and coughed twice. "Woo. Oh. after half a noise, broke free from the valley. Cough, don't get excited, things haven't been discussed yet. Roja quickly stopped the excited Estes, turning to look at Drago. I want Estes to make a revolution with you. How about it? Of course not in the East China Sea, your current target, but let her go to the South China Sea. She will be responsible for conquering the city. Your revolutionary army is responsible for providing information, and after she captures it, send someone to liberate the people and start ruling. The goal of the revolutionary army is not to rule. It's all the same, just say you agree or disagree. Roja waved his hand, and he didn't bother to argue with Drago about this. It didn't matter who ruled him, as long as it didn't interfere with his life. If he annoyed him, he wiped out all the top leaders of the revolutionary army and supported another. With his current strength, and with Artoria and Estes, he can do such a thing. It really doesn't work, let's call Accelerator again. Hearing this, Drago couldn't help falling into contemplation. He absolutely believed in Estes' commanding ability, but why did the Dimensional Brigade suddenly decide to help the revolutionary army? This kind of pie that fell from the sky, oh no, it should be a golden treasure, and Drago, who has been smashing it all the time, is a little confused. Is the Dimension Brigade really so kind? Or is there some ulterior conspiracy? After thinking for a long time, I couldn't think of anything, and Drago could only believe Roja's words. Yes, but what about the source of troops? Isn't that the source of soldiers there? Roja pointed to the beach. The Murloc people, Tiger asked quickly. Give it to you, all of it, but it's good, it's limited to those who are willing to go with you. Roja waved his hand, looking like he didn't care. There were only a few dozen Murlocs, and he wasn't going to fight with Tiger. Then I'm fine. Tiger sat down contentedly. To be honest, he was always a little nervous when he stayed with Roja and the others. After all, whether it is Dorag or Roja and Estes, they are all existences that can kill the Sun Pirates, and he is very satisfied with being able to win these. I have no problem here, when are we going? Drago no longer hesitated, and simply discussed leaving the New World. After a while, several people decided on the next itinerary. At that time, the Revolutionary Army will send coding craftsmen for them, and then the slave fleet will pass through the giant hole at the bottom of the Red Earth continent, and return to the first half of the Great Route through the submarine channel. As for the Sea Kings who are feared by the world in the Windless Belt, they are not considered by a few people at all. As long as they dare to come, they will dare to add meals. After the discussion, Estes walked to the bow with an expectant expression, and looked at everyone on the beach, like a general who was examining his subordinates. Roja couldn't help but smile when he saw Estes exuding an invisible and domineering back. The strongest sea, I don't know what it will be like to be beaten by Estes. Chapter 133 The Prototype of the Android Army. After dealing with the slave fleet, Roja left Estes there to train, oh no, train slaves. As for himself, his figure flashed, he launched teleportation, and returned to the Seven Waters. After returning to the villa and turning around, Roja did not see Monet, Sugar, and Arturia, probably in the magazine. The yard. The little Sanji, among the several training stakes, was tossing and turning, flying from time to time, kicking hard on the stakes with astonishing strength. Roja keenly noticed that on Sanji's legs, there were actually several lead bags for weight-bearing, which seemed to be heavy. The progress is good. Roja nodded with satisfaction. As early as a few months ago, when he had an idea for Germa 66, Roja began to train Sanji's combat power. Not only did he find a few famous leg skills for him, but he even specially selected a few people from Shadow to guide Sanji. No matter which of these people are the existences that can instantly kill Redfoot Zap, under such teaching, Sanji's strength naturally grows rapidly. Roja raised his eyebrows after seeing Sanji kicking a waist-thick stake with one leg. Sanji's progress is really good. If this continues, after a while, he will be able to return to Germa 66. The brothers and sisters who abused him. Just that it still needs some actual combat accumulation. Roha did not disturb Sanji and quietly left the yard. The figure flashed, and the next moment, Roha appeared in the research room of the Seven Waters. He had just appeared, and there was a faint and hurried footstep in the distance. After a while, several figures with murder weapons appeared around him, and without saying a word, they immediately launched an attack. Swords, throwing axes, and poison darts appear at the same time. Scoff. No one could see Roha's movements clearly, they only saw a few phantoms in the air, and the next moment a huge force hit everyone's chest. In an instant, the attacking figures flew out one after another, twisted their bodies in the air, and landed on the ground, looking at Roha, whose face was covered by a mask, as if facing an enemy. The person standing at the back hurriedly took out a flare gun from his arms and was about to fire it. But at this moment, Roha said, "It's me." At this time, the surrounding figures could clearly see Roha's appearance. "Sir. See your lord. My lord, forgive me." Seeing that it was Roha, the figures around him trembled and fell to the ground. Looking at the shadow members kneeling on the ground, Roha nodded with satisfaction. "The vigilance is good, but the strength is still need to practice again," said Roha and pointed at a person. "You take me to Tianjin Yashang." "Kai." "Yes, sir." The man immediately stood up, came to Roha's side respectfully, bent down and made a gesture of please. It wasn't until Roha's figure disappeared from sight that the shadow member who was kneeling on the ground raised his head with a look of excitement. "That's Lord Roha. It's the first time I've seen me." "Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it. I'm so strong. I didn't even see what was going on, so I was kicked out." HMPH, you guys, don't think that just now is the real strength of Lord Roha. If he wanted to do it just now, I'm afraid we will all die in an instant. Really, so strong. Boss, have you seen Lord Roha take action before? Tell us about it. Shadow, since the development of the organization, except for the number of code-named members who can only be powerful, the number of peripheral members has already exceeded 1,000 people and spread all over the world. Those who stayed outside the institute, except for the 4 code-named members who guarded the quartet, were only peripheral members, and most of them had never seen Roha himself. Seeing Roha suddenly made them inexplicably excited. From now on, they can go out and brag, and Lao Su is also someone who has played against adults. No one noticed that among them, there was a person who was attached to them while silently recording what everyone said in his heart. That is the shadow in the shadow, and each of them is a powerful person who was brainwashed by Roha's ability to use the psychological mastery. They are responsible for internal inspections, clean up the interior of shadow, and kill all those who hinder Roha's rule. They are the real executioners. Under the leadership of the shadow members, Roha walked through many levels and came all the way to the laboratory deep underground. The laboratory at the beginning was just a dilapidated warehouse, but under Roha's order, Shadow kept catching craftsmen from all over the world, and brought them all the way here for construction. Under Roha's wealthy money offensive, although the craftsmen complained about the method of Shadow, they still happily accepted the money and concentrated on their work. After all, the big money is the biggest in the world, and one job can earn income for several years, so you can just cover your face. In this way, regardless of money, the scale of the laboratory has been transferred to the ground in just a few months, and it has also expanded several times. Chi-Chi. The silver-white alloy door slowly slid to the sides, revealing the true face of the laboratory. Passing one after another mechanical equipment with a science fiction color, Roha saw Yashang Tianjing busy on the experimental bench at a glance. "Sir." Tianjing Yashang saw Roha coming in and hurried over to salute. "How is life here?" Roha asked with a smile. Hearing this, Yashang Tianjing was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that Roha's first question was not about the progress of the test, but about his life, and a warm current poured into his heart. "Very good." Tianjing Yashang nodded and smiled unconsciously. "This sentence is indeed true. Here, he doesn't have to worry about life-threatening experiments because of his experiments. He has vacations every once in a while, and he can enjoy life in the city of seven waters. Spend money casually, eat whatever you want, buy whatever you want, even if you want to vent the pressure of a man. You can find all kinds of beautiful women, although people will stare at him all the time, but Tianjin Yashang I don't care anymore, and happiness is about to fly. Life here is 10 times better than life in Academy City, no, 100 times better. He has even given up the idea of going back, and can't wait to live here for the rest of his life. That's good. Roha nodded. What about the progress of the experiment? Please come with me, my lord. When it came to the experiment, Tianjin Yashang suddenly turned serious, exuding the imposing manner of a researcher. With Roha, Yashang Tianjin came to another laboratory. As soon as he walked into the laboratory, Roha saw dozens of nutrition capsules of different specifications. And in each nutrition cabin, there is a sleeping person floating quietly. Chapter 134 Custom Android. This is an android. Looking at the scene in front of him, even Roha was shocked. Although he knew that Tianjin Yashang had complete artificial human technology in his hands, he didn't expect that it would produce results so quickly. Yes, this is an artificial man. Tianjin Yashang nodded proudly, and he could see that he was very happy with the results so quickly. Next, let me introduce the research results so far. Having said that, Tianjin Yashang came to the nutrition cabin and first took a photo of a nutrition cabin containing an adult man. This is the first standard template made, with a height of 1.80 meters, a weight of 70 kilograms, and a body fat rate of 12%. Considering the needs of combat, their physical fitness is kept at the peak of normal men. Next, Yashang Tianjin came to another training cabin. A blonde, waist-length, snow-skinned female android floats in the culture cabin. Female androids are different from male combat androids. Female androids are mostly used for special purposes such as intelligence gathering, so I made a special trip to collect all kinds of female genes from all over the world, and infused her brain with a series of relevant knowledge. I believe that no dignitary can resist her charm. Quote. Saying that, Tianjin Yashang laughed slyly. However, when he noticed Roha's slightly wrinkled brow, he trembled a little, and quickly shut his mouth, knowing that his flattery was hitting the horse's leg. Next, Yashang Tianjin introduced various artificial humans to Roha, ranging from boys and girls aged 11 or 2 to white-haired old men with old faces but not weak and strong physical fitness, covering all age groups. The uses are even more abundant. After listening, Roha couldn't help but nodded slowly to show his satisfaction. Although the strength of these androids is not good, they are heartfelt, and they are not afraid of death. It is very convenient to do some things. However, how long do they last? What about the manufacturing cost? Roha asked the most crucial question. Hearing Roha mention this, Tianjin Yashang scratched his head in distress. Because of the experimental equipment and research time, the peak period of these androids is only 3 years. Once this time limit is passed, their physical fitness will be reduced. The rapid decline will lead to a complete death in about a month. As for the manufacturing cost, it is still relatively low, and there is no problem with mass production. Xiao. 3 years. Roha frowned, a little dissatisfied. There is no way to prolong life. Yes, if you increase the culture time to 2 months, their lifespan will be extended to 5 years, but there is another way. Tianjin Yashang paused for a while, and then said, it takes 100 times the money to create a super long-lived individual. As long as it is maintained regularly, he can even live to be 100 years old. That's it. Roha raised his brows and couldn't wait to smell. You can create a special humanoid. There is no requirement for physical fitness, even an ordinary person, but other than that, I hope to remove all her negative emotions, and will not sleep, not coma. To eliminate negative emotions, this is very simple. If you don't fall into a coma, you only need to modify the neural arrangement, but in the end, this one won't sleep. Tianjin Yashang touched his chin and thought, and finally, he looked at Roja with some trepidation. Of course it is possible to make such an individual, but then the individual may have some special actions such as sleeping, or slow response, and this creation the cost. At least the equivalent of hundreds of ordinary androids. Quote. It's not a problem, you start building it today, the sooner the better. Understood. Tianjing Yashang nodded. What about special abilities? How's the development going? Roja asked again. Progress is slow. Tianjing Yashang shook his head without hesitation. Although you have found a zoological devil fruit ability for me, but devil fruit ability and superpower are always two different things, so the research progress extremely slow. Speaking of this, Tianjing Yashang deliberately stopped, and when he saw that Roja's face was not abnormal, he breathed a sigh of relief and continued. If possible, I still hope that adults can give me some genetic samples of superpowers, research and clone superpowers, that is my job. Superpower. Roja raised his brows and nodded after a while. I will send it to you in a while. This matter is really not difficult for Roja to say that he can become a different superpower with a few fragments, plus Accelerator, Masaka Makoto, Shirai Kuroko's 3 samples. It is easy to satisfy Tianjing Yashang research requirements. Next, Roja followed Tianjing Yashang to learn more about various experiments, and promised to find some assistance for him as soon as possible, and left the laboratory. Just when Roja went to Dream magazine to find Monet and the others. The Great Route, the New World, welcomed new guests. Whoa! A huge 1.7 pi. It was the 9 snake pirates led by Hancock. As soon as the ship emerged from the bottom of the water, the crew on the deck burst into exclamations and couldn't wait to lie on the railing of the ship and look around. This is the first time they have come to the legendary New World. Hancock stood on the bow of the ship, looking into the distance. His face was full of uncontrollable excitement. I can finally see you. Hancock remembered something, and his face suddenly turned crimson. Chapter 135 New Manga. Fate Stay Night. The next morning, Roja was sitting at the table at home, laying out a pen and paper to start drawing. Sister Zahn is about to end, and a new comic is needed. As for Conan's single-line serialization and magazine promotion, it does not conflict with the new comics. He drew this time was naturally the Fate Stay Night that he had drawn earlier. Referred to as FSN. It didn't take long for a cover of FSN to appear in front of Roja. Putting down the brush and looking at the cover, Roja couldn't help raising his eyebrows, and there was a trace of unhappiness between his eyebrows. And the source of his unhappiness is naturally the protagonist of FSN, Shuru Emiya. Thinking of his emotional entanglements with various women and his experiences with Artoria, Roja felt unhappy for a while. Although it's just a manga, if Roja draws Artoria to fall in love with someone else, he won't be able to draw at all. RIP_. He tore off the cover without hesitation. Roja sat in the chair and thought about it. The painting must be continued, but how can he change the pictures that make him uncomfortable without significantly changing the plot? 11 pretty girls with short brown red hair and eyes like amber appeared in Roja's mind. It's her, Gugazi. The heroine in the Fate Grand Order game. The image design comes from Shuru Emiya's sexual transformation, which is commonly known as Niangwa. Since that's the case, I can't be called Emiya Shuru, so I'll just call Emiya Shiro, or Shilang for short. Hey. Roja laughed unconsciously, the brush in his hand danced, and after a while, the image of Shirozi appeared on the drawing paper. At this moment, the voice of the system suddenly came from my mind. Detection of the host's painting sex transfer character, triggering the hidden task, mother-in-law author. Close black lens bracket. What? There's a hidden mission here. Roja twitched the corner of his mouth, with a speechless face. What the hell is the mother-in-law author? After thinking about it, Roja honestly clicked on the task panel and planned to see what was going on. Hidden mission. Niangwa is justice. Close black lens bracket. Task goal. Successfully draw 3 sex-turned characters, and the serialization is complete. Close black lens bracket. Quest reward. When summoning a comic character, you can choose whether or not to have sex. Close black lens bracket. I'll go, this reward. Awesome. Roha's eyes widened in disbelief, and after confirming again and again that the system was not joking with him, he was speechless while a little excited. A girly character. Can you still play the character of the original character? But even so, Roha's mind kept popping up one after another who was once turned into a girl by netizens. Neong Shining Gilgamesh Kiriko, Sword Art Online, Kuritani Kazuto, Suzuko Yuriko, Accelerator, a series of images of beautiful girls appeared one by one, and Roha's face couldn't help showing a ghostly smile. No, it's too perverted. Roha shook his head fiercely, expelling the increasingly vulgar images from his mind. What the hell, Neong Twinkle, can that still show Jin Twinkle's domineering? However, even so, Roha couldn't control his hand, and with a few swipes, he outlined the outline of Neong Ding. This is all to complete the task. If there is a task, don't do it. Roha said to himself, the brush in his hand kept on, and the new cover was painted in a while. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door, and then Arturia came in. Roha, it's time to eat. Well, wait and I'll go. Roha didn't lift his head, responded casually, entered the creative state, and really didn't want to move. Arturia just wanted to go back, but when she thought that if Roha couldn't be called, Monet might not be able to cook, so she flattened her mouth and walked in. As soon as she came over, Arturia saw the cover art that was placed next to it. So I will participate in another Holy Grail war. Arturia looked at herself on the cover, raised her eyebrows, and the hairs on her head shook. Although it was said that she had not experienced any Holy Grail war when she was summoned, but after reading Roha's comics, she also knew the process of the Holy Grail war and the cruel results. To be honest, after watching it once, Arturia was a little bit unwilling to participate in that ghost thing again. If the Holy Grail hadn't fulfilled her wish. A dim look flashed in Arturia's eyes, but she quickly adjusted and carefully looked at the cover in her hand. This should be my master this time. It turned out to be a girl. After a little glance at Emiyashuru, the mother-in-law standing beside her, Arturia stopped paying attention. This is Kotomine Kirei. He participated in the Holy Grail War again. When she saw Kotomine Kirei wearing a priest's uniform, Arturia couldn't help showing a look of disgust on her face. She was extremely impressed by the culprit who completely disrupted the last Holy Grail War, a pervert within a pervert. It was this person who killed Tasaka Rin's father Tasaka Tokiomi, and indirectly forced Maid Carrier to death, causing countless tragedies, and even when his father died, he actually expressed regret. It's a pity that I couldn't kill my father with my own hands. Angrily glanced at Kotomine Kirei a few times, Arturia could not wait to pull Kotomine Kirei out and hack to death in person. This kind of person, in the Holy Grail War of 460, can never do good things. Angry turned into anger, and Arturia knew that she couldn't do anything at all. After gasping for a few breaths, she continued to observe the others. This is Tasaka Rin, so this is Sakura. So she is still alive. When she saw Maid Sakura, Tasaka Sakura, a warm smile bloomed on Arturia's face. She has always had sympathy for this little girl who was adopted by Tokiomi Tosaka and was persecuted by the Maid family. Now seeing Sakura growing up successfully and looking healthy, Arturia breathed a sigh of relief. This is Ilya. After Arturia saw Ilya with white hair and red eyes, Arturia subconsciously looked at Rin Tasaka who had grown up beside her, showing a puzzled look. How is this going? Rin Tasaka has grown so big, why is Ilya still the same little girl as the last one? Tilt her head, Arturia expressed her confusion. Well, this is a spearman, this is a lancer, this is a caster, magician. Why is there a swordsman, and what is the position of this red-clothed servant? Chapter 136 Arturia and FSN. Seeing again, Sasaki Kojira holding a sword, and Hiro Emiya holding two swords, Arturia was lost again. At this time, she didn't know that it was from FSN that melee archers even became the mainstream, an existence that made countless netizens talk about it. Archers can't melee. Is that still an archer? As for the second swordsman, Arturia did not struggle for a long time. The Holy Grail War is a magical chaos, and some special situations are prone to occur, but this does not prevent Arturia from being curious about it. Just after reading half of the cover, Arturia developed a strong interest in Roha's new manga. When the time comes, you must get the original manuscript and read it in advance. Arturia nodded, and the dull hair on her head swayed up and down with a happy look on her face. There was still a little bit of the cover left, so she looked down, and Arturia, who was in a better mood, planned to read it. With just one glance, she noticed Gilgamesh, who was transformed by Roan. Huh, this is Gilgamesh. How did she become a woman? Arturia looked at Neon Twinkle in surprise. Although Jin Twinkle became Neon Twinkle, neither her arrogant expression nor her blonde golden armor and red eyes had changed, so Arturia could recognize it at a glance. Looking down, Arturia's eyes stayed on the upper body of Neon Twinkle, looked at Neon Twinkle, then looked down at herself, and looked at herself on the cover. After feeling the very obvious gap, Alto Lea's stunned hair straightened up. He turned his head to look at Roha. His eyes were very bad. What is this guy thinking about all day? Although Arturia's movements are rich, she has always been careful not to make a sound, for fear of disturbing Roha. However, the sudden murderous aura still alarmed Roha. Turning his head cautiously, he met Arturia's emerald green eyes at a glance. Feeling the murderous aura in Arturia's eyes, Roha raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Dao. Didn't have enough to eat. ... Roha, who was confused, finished breakfast with a look of confusion on his face, looked at Arturia, who walked away angrily, looked at her plate that seemed to have been licked, and twitched the corners of his mouth. As expected of my king, when he gets angry, he is so domineering when he eats. After eating, Roha stopped Monet, who was planning to go to the magazine, and took out the thunder fruit that had been prepared long ago from the storage space. This is for you. Roha shoved the thunder fruit into Monet's hand. This is the fruit of thunder. Monet's pupils shrank and exclaimed. Roha's collection of various information. Sometimes she will look at it. There is a devil fruit illustration book. She recognized this famous natural fruit at a glance. It can be said that as long as you eat this fruit, you can become a rare powerhouse in the world. No matter how poor the fruit's ability is, it is enough to run rampant in the first half of the Great Root. No, brother, take it back, I don't need this at all. Monet hurriedly stuffed the fruit back. I'll give it to you if I say it. How could Roha take back what he had planned to give to Monet? Although the ability of the thunder fruit is strong, it is just the icing on the cake for him today, and it is optional. Monet is his own woman after all, so it's just right to feed her. And by the way, he can liberate Arturia, so he doesn't need to protect her anymore. Seeing that Monet refused to eat, Roha stopped talking nonsense, and suddenly stretched out his hand and put it on Monet's armpit, scratching it. Ha ha ha, brother, what are you doing? Ha ha ha, ooh, Monet. She couldn't help laughing and twisted in Roha's arms. While Monet was laughing, Roha grabbed the thunder fruit directly, stuffed it into Monet's mouth, stretched out his hand and pushed his chin, and Monet bit off a piece of the thunder fruit. Don't spit it out, the devil fruit has no effect after being eaten. Roha urged quickly. Hearing Roha's words, Monet glanced at him angrily, and obediently swallowed the fruit in his mouth. Gudong. As soon as he swallowed it, Monet's pretty face wrinkled together, and his face suddenly flushed. She had never eaten something so bad. Seeing this scene, Roha couldn't help laughing strangely, and asked curiously, how is it? What does it taste like? Cough cough, can't describe it. Monet quickly took a sip of the drink on the table, stuck out his tongue, and looked uncomfortable. But even so, she snatched the thundering fruit in Roha's hand, and with a determined look, she ate it in a big mouth. Roha opened his mouth, but finally did not speak. He knew that the devil fruit only had to take a bite, and of course Monet knew that the reason for this was that Monet didn't want to waste Roja's kindness. If it is not eaten, will it affect the fruit's ability? A warm current flowed in Roja's heart, gently hugging Monet into his arms. A warm atmosphere circulated between the two. Chapter 137 Comic 2 Combo. A few days later, FSN officially started serialization in Fantasy magazine. On the first day of serialization, Dream magazine's sales reached a new peak. Countless fans of the Holy Grail War are rushing to buy it, and the store owners of the Holy Grail War themed everywhere are even more happy. Originally, because the Holy Grail War was over for too long and their business was sluggish, they were all ready to change the theme. I didn't expect that Mr. Gauchi actually drew a sequel. Nice job. Naval Headquarters, Marin Vando. Warring States immediately got the magazine sent by his subordinates. When he saw that this issue of comics was a sequel to the Holy Grail War, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief after being nervous for a long time. Fortunately, it's a sequel to the Holy Grail War, and nothing else. During this time, Sengoku was really terrified by the comics of Dream magazine. First, One Piece, let Garp and the red-haired pirates fight. Although there were no casualties, the warring states who were sitting in Marin Vando were still worried for a long time. After all, it was the Four Emperors pirates. If they really fought, Garp and Aokiji would have to be left alone. Magazine has produced another Red Eye, which has made people all over the place panic. What the hell is going to happen? Not only that, there are people who spread the smears of various nobles everywhere. It would be fine if they were made up, but what really drives the warring states mad is that the smears spread by those guys are actually facts. After reading the information compiled by the intelligence department, even the warring states period became angry. These nobles are really lawless and waste their lives. For this reason, he also specially ordered that several minor nobles were executed to kill chickens and monkeys. However, the anger of the people cannot be quelled by the death of a few nobles. What they really want to see is the death of those great nobles. However, even in the warring states period, he could not easily deal with those great nobles. The interests involved were too deep, and some of them even had inextricable relationships with the Tianlong people. In this case, he could only use various excuses for a reason. In the face of the inaction of the world government, the dissatisfaction of the people quickly accumulated, and the warring states were anxious but could not do anything, and even said that due to pressure, they had to send a navy to suppress some rioting people. Although the warring states period also wanted to start from the root and directly clear the culprit behind the distribution of the black history of the nobles, but after investigations and investigations, they actually investigated the heads of the Revolutionary Army. Alternative. And GT. There's no way to catch this. We don't even know where the headquarters of the Revolutionary Army is. What's more, under the current circumstances, many people who have been persecuted by the nobles already have resistance to the world government. Even if they discover the traces of the Revolutionary Army, there will be bold people to help conceal it, and there is no way to find it. Don't think about it, the warring states also knew that the power of the Revolutionary Army must have grown a lot after cutting the Red Eyes. However, although countless evidence points to the Revolutionary Army, the warring states period feels that things are not that simple. There must be other forces, lest the world will not be in chaos, and they will make trouble behind. If I let the old man know who is behind the scenes, I will definitely take action and annihilate them. This is the original words of the warring states period. Even Garp was shocked by the warring states period at that time. He had not seen the warring states spirit for many years. That's it. Until recently, the Scarlet Pupil is still serialized, and the Dream magazine has double opened for the first time, launching the real Fatal Blow, Detective Conan. This comic completely ignited the anger in the hearts of the people, and made everyone see the hope of revenge. It is good. You don't kill, do you? We kill ourselves. If you have won, catch us. I was the one who watched Conan all night and studied Conan over and over hundreds of times. There are all kinds of killing methods, and I am so familiar with them that I don't even know what killing mechanism I can devise. If you can catch me, you're awesome. It must be said that the power of the people is powerful, and the wisdom produced by countless people is also amazing. In the case of dozens of noble deaths, the Navy has really caught only a handful of murderers. Facing a brand new killing method, the Navy, which has always been responsible for maintaining order, was suddenly a little confused and couldn't keep up with the rhythm at all. It is even said that the death of some nobles is no different from suicide. If it is not known that the other party is impossible to commit suicide, the Navy does not even want to investigate. It's too brain-burning. Let them go to fight with the pirates. At least those guys will only fight head-to-head and won't come to this kind of thing. If you fight pirates, you will be injured a little bit. The big deal is death. Let them solve the case. The final result is that tens of thousands of navies have been dispatched to naval bases around the world, but only less than 1/10 of the murderers have been caught. When I first saw this result, warring states almost didn't come up in one breath and fainted. This face hits, slaps. Where's the face of the Navy? It was also from that day that the warring states really paid attention to Conan, and quickly dispatched the think tanks in the Navy to form a special department. This special department is nothing else, that is, a large group of people stay in the room all day to study various cases, solve cases and analyze them. One-liners. As for Sengoku himself, the cat was in the office, writing criminal reasoning. With so many thoughts in his mind, warring states touched his already gray hair and couldn't help sighing. These white hairs grew when I was studying Conan. You know, he was full of black and shiny black hair before, and his body was extremely strong. It was no problem to kill a sea king with one punch, but because of a comic, he grew white hair, and even people were a lot haggard. How does the brain of this special Gaushi look like? Is it different from normal people? How can you draw such a brain-burning thing? If he draws a few more similar books, should he retire early because of overuse of his brain and staying up too late? Fortunately, this guy finally stopped painting those disgusting world government things. Looking at the fantasy magazine in his hand, Sengoku smiled with satisfaction. The sequel to Holy Grail War is good, it's popular, attractive, and has nothing to do with the government. It must be vigorously promoted. Let this comic divert people's attention. The warring states thought to himself. Chapter 138 Life in Warring States is worthy of being a marshal of the Navy, and with a single order, naval bases all over the world began to act. Distributing flyers, advertising, and dispatching local newspapers to help sell them. With the blessing of various methods, Roha gained 8 million fans in just the first month. Looking at the sudden increase in sales, Roha was a little confused. What kind of wind is the Navy pumping? Why did you suddenly start supporting comics? In any case, the increase in fan value is a good thing, and Roha didn't think too much. Anyway, the Navy can't play the game, even if something happens, it's good to see the tricks. Like the sudden increase in sales, a huge number of fan letters from all over the world were sent to Dream magazine, and Roha would read it when he was idle, just to pass the time. Author, I am a big fan of your manga, and I have been following it since the Holy Grail War was serialized. I have read all of your manga, and now I have a question to ask you. When did Kotomine Kirei die? Close black lens bracket. Spoilers will affect your reading experience, so just follow the comics honestly. Roha wrote a reply. Mr. Gaushi, is this book a heroine? Let me tell you, you must draw the heroine and Artoria together. There is true love between the same sex. Men are so disgusting. Close black lens bracket. This, won't it be a lily? Looking at the graceful font on the stationery, Roha twitched the corners of his mouth. He didn't expect such a group to exist in the pirate world. After thinking about it, Roha wrote a line on the letter paper. Lily is infinitely good, but she can't give birth. If you want a child, you have to find someone to help. Lily, what a waste of resources. The author is great, every character you describe has its own characteristics. I really want to know about their past stories. I wonder if you have any desire to draw independent characters. Close black lens bracket. This. Roha tapped on the table with a pen, his eyebrows subconsciously picked, and fell into thinking. The extravagance of an independent character. If it is drawn, it can definitely increase the sales of FSN to a new height, but he did not draw it at all. Like Gilgamesh and Enkidu, Kotomine Kire's growth and his wife's suicide, Sakura's detailed book of life in Meitu's house, Arturia's murder of a child female, these things Roha really wanted to draw. What? Wait, something strange seems to have gotten in. Well, who cares, anyway, there is no mighty force called harmony in this world, and you can paint whatever you want. Well, why didn't you draw it yourself? Roha suddenly thought, after drawing so many comics, his drawing skills have long surpassed that of the comic gods in the previous life, and he can still do things like independent painting. It's just that the plot is a little troublesome. Thinking of this, Roha suddenly remembered that in the comics, there is a type of comics with weak plots but very popular. V.U. Shan. That's a manga collectively known as Riffin. Compared to the spirit of eating halberds, comics with limited audience such as Holy Grail War, it seems that Lifen is an all-professional kill. No, Roha shook his head, expelling the hee-hee plot that suddenly popped up in his mind. What kind of black beasts, fathers love like mountains, sick buildings, etc., he has never seen it at all, and he has no idea at all. I can't draw these for my own reputation. However, it seems that I can really earn a wave of fan points, that kind of thing, I can draw one a day without relying on the system. Roha tangled again. Just as Roha was about to be on the dangerous road, going further and further away, a knock on the door suddenly sounded. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, Roha frowned and his eyes became cold. Sugar was still sleeping upstairs, Sanji went out to fight the rogues in the city, and Monet went out to train his abilities, accompanied by Arturia. Who is that knocking on the door? Come in, Roha said loudly. The next moment, a man dressed in black walked in and kneeled respectfully in front of Roha. It turned out to be Genzo. What's the matter? Roha looked at his intelligence commander indifferently, with an indifferent tone, and he didn't make any move to let Genzo hide. Sir, there is news from Lord Estes that the Revolutionary Army has successfully transported the coding craftsmen to the New World, and it is expected that they will travel through the New World in 40 days. Genzo replied loudly with his head lowered. 40 days, so long. Roha frowned, but quickly reacted. The coding craftsmen are all in the Chambord Islands, and few people are willing to leave the islands. It is estimated that the Revolutionary Army brought too few craftsmen, and there were too many ships in the slave fleet, so it took so long. Well, I see, you did a good job this time. If there is news from Estes in the future, you must tell me as soon as possible. Roha nodded lightly. After Genzo reported a few more important pieces of information, he left respectfully. After such a toss, Roha's mind also calmed down and no longer thought about Lifen. Although it can earn a lot of fan points, but painting that kind of thing is really a disgrace. Genzo, who left at this time, never imagined that because of his actions, he saved the bodies of tens of thousands of teenagers in the world of pirates, and prevented them from indulging in indescribable comics, resulting in a loss of their bodies. At this time, the Great Route, the New World. A huge pirate ship floated on the sea, and a dark pirate flag fluttered in the wind. The pattern on the pirate flag is a skull with 4 skeletons and a pair of curved long horns. The banner of the 4 Emperor Kaido. Kaido's huge body stood on the deck, staring at the sea in the distance. Haven't found it yet? Kaido asked in a low voice, with a hint of irritability in his tone. It has been a month since they went to sea. Dozens of clippers are wandering in the whole New World. Nearly 100 intelligence personnel are investigating everywhere, but so far the beast pirates have not found the position of the slave fleet. The long wait has made Kaido a little irritable. Sir, please don't worry. We have searched 60% of the sea area, and only a small half of it is left. With the number of other ships, as long as they appear, they will definitely be discovered by the people below. Please wait patiently for a while. When he said this, the intelligence officer kept kneeling on the ground and didn't even dare to lift his head, for fear that any words would anger Kaido and he would be crushed into flesh by Kaido. As soon as possible. Kaido responded coldly, staring at the sea in the distance, his fists clenched unconsciously. Man known as the strongest creature in the world, is about to reach the limit of his endurance. Revolutionary Army, if you were behind the scenes in stealing the laboratory, then you will disappear from this world. Endless murderous aura was brewing in Kaido's heart, only waiting for someone to appear in front of him, and then let it out completely. Chapter 139 The Shock of Fate. Time flies, another month has passed in the blink of an eye, and the plot of the Fifth Holy Grail War has gradually reached a small peak. With Roha's increasingly sophisticated painting ability, FSN is far better than the original in terms of the fineness of the picture quality and the battle scenes. The heroic Guardian Palace against Cu Chulainn made everyone see an extremely intense short-handed battle. In the battle between Arturia and Cuchulainn, the noble phantasm used by Cuchulainn caused a great uproar in the world. Pierce the Spear of Death Thorns, the magic spear that reverses cause and effect. The effect is to reverse the cause and effect. The effect that must hit the heart is exchanged with the cause that decides to wield the spear to attack, so as to achieve the effect of an absolute hit. Such power has moved countless strong men. Even in the Navy and even the Four Emperor pirates, many people have had a heated discussion on this. If the Dimensional Brigade really possesses this kind of weapon, how should it be defended? Some people say that the elementalization of the natural system can resist this blow, and some people say that as long as it is resisted with the ultimate armed color and domineering, it will be fine so that the gun cannot pierce the body. In short, there are different opinions, and no one knows what to do before the Dimensional Brigade really uses this powerful weapon. Under the deterrence of the spear piercing the thorns of death, the next peak duel between Arturia and Hercules, although cool, did not cause too much trouble. After all, in this battle, the introduction of Hercules' noble phantasm was very vague, and Arturia's noble phantasm was already known in Fate Zero. In the blink of an eye, the story of the Fifth Holy Grail War came to Ludong Temple, and the battle between Arturia and Kojiro Sasaki also appeared in the magazine. In this volume, the sword skills shown by Sasaki Kojiro are tantamount to throwing a nuclear bomb in the group of pirate swordsmen. Secret Sword Yan Return. With pure swordsmanship, he surpassed the limits of human beings and rose to the height of magic. NLT. And the final thing is that in the comics, Sasaki Kojiro himself told the secret of his practice of swallowing. At that moment, all the sword-wielding people in the pirate world were boiling. Everyone saw the dawn of becoming a strong man. Iota, you must know that in the manga, it was Arturia who fought against Kojiro Sasaki. The one who stayed in the Seven Waters, defeated countless swordsmen, and never lost Altoria. Even such a strong person almost died on the secret sword Yunwei, if they learned this sword skill. Some people couldn't help laughing, hugging Dream magazine tightly in their arms, dreaming that they would learn the secret sword, Yanwei, so as to defeat countless powerful enemies and become famous in the sea. Great Root, an island beach. Hawkeye Mahawk sat quietly on the reef, watching this issue of Dream magazine intently. When he saw the battle between Yinglingwei Palace and Medea, he just glanced at it lightly and turned over. However, when watching the battle between Arturia and Sasaki Kojiro, Hawkeye's expression became extremely solemn, and almost every scene had to be watched several times before moving on to the next one. Among the clips about Miji and Yanwei, Hawkeye even lowered his head and pondered while watching, and he did not turn the page for a long time. A short volume of serialization, Hawkeye watched it for nearly 2 hours before reading it. When he closed the magazine, he breathed a sigh of relief. The whole figure seemed to have suddenly rested after a tiring work, and suddenly relaxed. Secret Sword Swallow Return. Hawkeye looked at Sasaki Kojiro on the cover and murmured in a low voice, "It's really a magical skill. The more skilled the swordsman is, the more he understands the true power of Janyanwei. As the world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye has to admit that Janyanwei is far superior to any kind of swordsmanship he has mastered. It is even said that even if he encounters this trick without any precaution, he may drink and hate on the spot. Touching the back, there was a cold and smooth feeling on the palm of his hand. And fought against the secret sword Yanwei. After patting the dust on his clothes and putting the dream magazine close to him, Hawkeye pulled out the supremely sharp knife, Black Knife Knight. Holding a knife in one hand, Hawkeye came to a huge reef. Woo! Hawkeye first took a deep breath, then spit it out softly, and finally changed to holding a knife 3.4 in both hands, and slowly closed his eyes. Yan Hui's trajectory and Yan Hui's cultivation method flashed through his mind one by one, and finally turned into a flying swallow flying in the air. Feiyan danced around in Hawkeye's mind, constantly changing directions, and finally, in a certain second, it flew in front of Hawkeye. It's now. Eagle's eyes narrowed, the arms holding the sword blurred for a moment, and the next moment, 3 sword lights suddenly appeared in the air, and slashed on the reef in front of him. Chapter 140 Hawkeye and Yanwei. The knife light suddenly appeared, and a series of dense gravel sounds followed. Click, click, click. The tens of tons of reefs were instantly chopped into several sections, and in the sound of a piece of rock rubbing, it collapsed with a bang, bringing up countless smoke and dust. If this blow is slashed on the warship, I am afraid that the entire warship will be completely sunk. However, even though this blow caused astonishing destructive power, Hawkeye still frowned, his face gloomy as if water was about to drip. The gap is too big. Hawkeye sighed silently. Mign Yan returned at the same time, using 3 knives without interval, as if 3 people sent slashes at the same time, making the enemy unable to defend at all. However, the 3 knives he just made, if not for strength and strength, even a swordsman can block them. It is simply the gap between heaven and earth. What's the problem? Hawkeye stood there and began to think. But after thinking hard for a long time, he couldn't find any clue. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly fell in the sky. Hawkeye, who felt a sense of it, instantly drew his knife and slashed it. Just when the blade was about to hit the shadow, Hawkeye raised his brows, quickly shifted his sword stance, and slashed to the ground. 11. Boom. In an instant, a ravine more than 10 meters long appeared on the ground, several meters deep. At this time, the black shadow reacted and flew towards the sky in a panic. It was a messenger gull. Looking at the message gull in the sky, Hawkeye showed a thoughtful look. Suddenly, a flash of light flashed in his mind. He suddenly remembered the object of Sasaki Kojira's practice of swallowing in the comics. Swallow. That swallow practice, maybe you can make a breakthrough. Addicted to the power of Yanwei, the inextricable Eagle Eye, without hesitation, plundered the city in the distance. There, it should be possible to buy swallows caught by hunters. However, what made Hawkeye a little puzzled was that, for some unknown reason, that gull kept flying in the sky, following him in the distance, and kept calling. Hawkeye, who was concerned about Yanwei, ignored this strange messenger gull, but ran with his head down. However, if he knew the language of birds and could understand what the messenger gull said, it is estimated that he would turn around immediately and chop off the messenger gull. Silly beep. What are you running? Practice swordsmanship and practice stupid. I just want to see if you can buy a newspaper or not, and even cut me down. I've heard from my fellow clan that something is wrong these 2 days. There are always humans with swords slashing us. I didn't expect that I would actually encounter it. If I hadn't reacted quickly, I would have died. Master O, do you know that? Shinbao, you dare to cut it, it's really boring. Wait, you can buy a newspaper from us in the future, I'll lose, Lord O. At this time, Hawkeye, who was running wildly on the ground, didn't know that he had provoked a little leader of the news gull who held revenge. It was because of the misunderstanding just now that he never bought any magazines from Shinbao from now on. After all Shinbao saw him, they turned around and ran away, no matter what he called, without taking them with them. Back. The galloping eagle-eye came to the city not long after, and the messenger gull following him disappeared without knowing when. After a few inquiries with passers-by, Hawkeye managed to find a shop specializing in flying birds. "Boss, do you have any swallows here?" Hawkeye asked impatiently. "Swallow?" The bald-headed boss gave Hawkeye a surprised look, then turned to the knife he was carrying, and shook his head regretfully. "There were originally a few, but they were all bought this morning." "Excuse me." Hawkeye turned away without ink. Looking at the back of Hawkeye's departure, the boss pouted with a pained look on his face. "If I knew it earlier, I would have bought a few more. Who knew that so many people came to buy swallows in the past 2 days? The survival of the store alone would not be enough to sell them." Next, Hawkeye visited several similar stores, and without exception, all the swallows were bought out. Standing at the door of a shop, the world's largest swordsman, Eagle Eye, fell into confusion because he couldn't buy swallows. "Do you want to catch it yourself?" As soon as the thought came up, it was ruthlessly snuffed out by Hawkeye. He doesn't even know where there are swallows, where to catch them. By the way, who is the guy who moved so fast and bought all the swallows? Are you doing something? At this moment, a guy with a mustache suddenly sneaked over and quietly came behind Hawkeye. "Swa, _." Before he could reach out, a hand was already on his neck. The eagle-eyed sharp eyes looked at this sneaky guy with cold eyes. "Uncle, don't be in a hurry, I'm here to sell things," the bearded man said in a trembling tone, his legs trembling like a sieve, and the eagle-eyed gaze really frightened him. "Sell what?" "Swallows, swallows. I sell swallows," the bearded man hurriedly responded. "Lead the way." Hawkeye withdrew his hand and raised his head slightly. "Yes." The bearded man nodded and turned around and started to lead the way. It's just that he just turned his head, and his face suddenly turned bitter. He seemed to have found a customer who was not easy to mess with. "I hope this transaction will be successful." After a while, the two came to a dilapidated warehouse. As soon as he entered the warehouse, Eagle Eye saw dozens of bird cages with swallows, and more than a dozen big men with guns standing in the warehouse. "That's our boss, you can just talk to him, uncle." The bearded man pointed quietly in a direction, where a round table was placed. The table was full of food, and a burly man was sitting at the table feasting. After finishing speaking, while Hawkeye was walking over there, the bearded man made an excuse and left the warehouse. As soon as he walked out of the warehouse, he began to run wildly, as if he would not run and die without stopping. In fact, when they sell swallows, they are slaughtering people. 100,000 bellies are not allowed to leave. If they have no money, they keep their money. In the past 2 days, relying on more than a dozen guns, they really made a fortune. However, there is a faint feeling in the bearded man. The guy he just got over is not a target that a dozen guns can deal with. He estimates that this business has collapsed, and it will definitely fight in a while, and many people will die. In order to avoid bringing disaster to Chiyu, it is better to go first.